There were 3 groups of people who held different opinions towards the previous post. The first group swore at Gunning using many dirty words, but most of them were girls. The second group was neutral. They didn't think that a photo without the face of the driver was solid proof. The last group naturally supported Gunning. All in all, the neutral group was the majority in this mess. Meanwhile, those who blamed Gunning were violently slammed by Hao Ran and the others who supported Gunning. Boys were better than girls when it came to violence after all, no matter if it was verbal or physical. Thus the number of people swearing at Gunning was decreasing. Gunning's post came to the top a short time after she had posted it. Many left positive comments to support her. In fact, the fake news wasn't a big deal. As long as most chose to believe her, it would soon be forgotten, but if most chose to criticize her, it would go abroad. Boss, we trust you. Boss, let's teach the person who is behind this a serious lesson. Hao Ran and the others commented. Gunning, we trust and support you. Exactly, I agree that we need to beat the one who hurt our goddess Gu. Agree. Of course, there were many who had doubts. Although your explanation makes sense, you can't prove that the person who took you to school isn't your sugar daddy. Indeed, you don't have solid proof either. Gunning then replied to their comments. I think I've made it pretty clear. Those who dislike me will continue to slut-shame me, and those who trust me will always believe me. And let me tell you this. Anyone who deliberately damages my reputation should be careful. I will get revenge.
Gunning threatened blindly.
Gunning, that's a threat. So what? If it's my fault, you can enjoy swearing at me. However, since it's not, I won't stay quiet. A bunch of comments supported Gunning, especially Hao Ran and his friends. Those who still disliked Gunning didn't dare to argue back anymore. In the second classroom, Chen Xiao fixed her eyes on the forum. Seeing that most chose to believe Gunning, she was in a rage. Chen Xiao used a new account to send the post, so she was not worried that she would be exposed, but she forgot that there was something called a driving recorder. Leng Xiaoting focused on the forum as well. He was relieved to see that most supported Gunning. After the class, Chu Peihan and the other ran to Gunning without delay. Boss, how is it going? Did you check your friend's driving recorder yet?
Muke asked.
Yes, Gunning said. Who did it? Several of them asked at the same time. Gunning took her phone out, playing the video in front of their eyes. What? It's her. They were all shocked, but they accepted it quickly because they knew that the girl never liked Gunning. After that, they were all mad. I'm going to go punch her right now. Chu Peihan was annoyed. She turned around to go to the classroom, but was stopped by Gunning. Please don't. Beating her isn't the best way to solve this problem. Then what should we do? Chu Peihan asked. I want her to apologize to me in front of all the students and teachers in our school, Gunning said. She understood that Chen Xiao was proud, and that it would be a torture for her to apologize to Gunning in front of everyone in public. Gunning intended to embarrass her, because she deserved it. Since Gunning said so, Chu Peihan wouldn't spoil her plan. Hao Ran and other boys also wanted to beat Chen Xiao, but they were boys and normally wouldn't bully a girl. If Gunning and Chu Peihan couldn't deal with it, they would do it for them. I'm not going back to my classroom. I'm afraid that I won't be able to resist the impulse to beat her. I think I'll attend class in your classroom. Chu Peihan believed that it was a better idea to stay here, instead of going back to her classroom. Gunning didn't know what to say, but she understood that Chu Peihan couldn't control her temper, so she answered, Fine. When the class was about to begin, they went back to their classrooms. The minute Chu Peihan walked inside, all the students in the fourth classroom were frightened. Luckily, there were 2 vacant seats in the fourth classroom. Chu Peihan wasn't willing to sit with others, so she pulled a seat over to sit with Gunning and Yu Mixi. This was the physics class, and the teacher was the head teacher of the second classroom, Zhang Yuan. Chu Peihan was caught right on sight, but she was always absent from her classes, so she wasn't afraid of Zhang Yuan at all. If it hadn't been for Gunning, she wouldn't have been in her class as often. It was even surprising to see her in a class. Therefore, Jiang Yuan only took a glance at Chu Peihan before he started the class. Once Chu Peihan was in a class, she would focus on it unless she was sleepy. In the following classes, the teachers all stayed calm at seeing Chu Peihan and continued without saying anything. The rain meanwhile had already stopped. When the last class was over, Chen Xiao still hadn't deleted the post. Gu Ning and her friends then directly stopped her in her classroom. Chen Xiao panicked at seeing Gu Ning and her friends. Was I exposed?
No, impossible.
Chen Xiao refused to believe it, but she wanted to escape right now. Besides, these people before her weren't easy to deal with. She was likely to suffer. What do you want to do? Chen Xiao's voice was trembling. What do we want to do? Chen Xiao, do you really think that we don't know that it was you who posted the fake news? Don't flatter yourself. You aren't smart enough to do evil things without being discovered. Chu Peihan teased. She looked at Chen Xiao with obvious disdain. Chen Xiao's face changed dramatically. How? How did they find out? Chen Xiao was not the only one who was surprised. Everyone around her, including Qin Zheng and the others, also looked to her in amazement. What? Chen Xiao did it? If that was true, then Chen Xiao must be a vicious girl who would do anything to hurt others. No one supported Chen Xiao. Actually, in the beginning, Qin Zheng thought that the news was true. But after Gu Ning's statement was released, he chose to believe Gu Ning. Gu Ning was indeed from a poor family, but it didn't mean that she couldn't have rich relatives or friends. Speaking of rich relatives, Gu Xiaoxiao's family was a great example, although they didn't get along. As for her rich friends, there were many of them like Mu Ku, Hao Ran and Yi Qin Zixuan and Chu Peihan. Gu Ning also maintained a good relationship with Qin Yifan as well as In Qian, who was the daughter of the director of the central hospital, too. Therefore, it was possible that Gu Ning had many other rich friends. Although Qin Zheng was curious about how she got to know these people, he understood that Gu Ning wasn't simple after the car accident. He was reluctant to miss the outstanding Gu Ning, but didn't dare to annoy her. Do you have proof to prove that I did it? If you don't have proof, it's slander. Chen Xiao forced herself to be calm, but her voice was a little weak. She was merely an 18-year-old girl, who couldn't hide her real feelings. Slander? Gee, I didn't expect that you even knew this word. Gu Ning laughed, as if it was a joke to hear the word come out of Chen Xiao's mouth. Chen Xiao didn't have solid proof, but she had still spread the fake news about Gu Ning. Now she wanted Gu Ning to provide proof, which was ridiculous. Gu Ning added, since you agree that it would be slander if you don't have proof, why did you do the same thing? Do you have proof? You only took a meaningless photo. Isn't it ridiculous that you posted the fake news about me? At that time, Hao Ran supported Gu Ning. Exactly. Why do you claim Gu Ning has a sugar daddy just because she got out of a luxury car? You don't have solid proof at all. Since you don't have proof, it's slander. You even posted it on the forum. We can sue you, and you're at the age where you would have to take legal responsibility. Hearing that, Chen Xiao's face turned pale. The last thing she wanted to do in this world was to have to take legal responsibility. Chen Xiao, I thought that you would be quiet after what happened to Gu Xiaoxiao. If so, I would have forgiven you for what you did to me. But to my surprise, you went the opposite way. I wouldn't come to you unless I had solid proof. We're not as dumb as you are. Saying that, Gu Ning took out her phone, clicking the video, playing it for Chen Xiao. Chen Xiao, did you know that there is a thing called a driving recorder? Besides, there are surveillance cameras at the door of our school. It was very easy to find out who took the photo. Chen Xiao was stunned and could barely stand. She hadn't known that there was a driving recorder on the car. What was worse, she had shown herself right in front of the recorder. Now what else do you want to say?
Chu Peihan's no.
Chen Xiao wasn't able to deny it anymore. But she didn't want to give up, even though she was scared of facing Gu Ning and others. So what? I only took a photo. But it's enough to prove that you have a sugar daddy. Chen Xiao argued. You don't have solid proof? From the law's perspective, it's slander. I can sue you for that. Gu Ning said seriously, which shut Chen Xiao's mouth. The rest in the classroom started to support Gu Ning. Exactly, she doesn't have solid proof anyway. It could damage Gu Ning's reputation. She's such a horrible person. She should be expelled like Gu Xiaoxiao. I agree. I don't want to study in the same school as her. I think Gu Ning should call the police. I think she should sue her and throw her into the jail. Shut up. Shut your mouth, Chen Xiao yelled. She hated the thought of being expelled or arrested by the police, let alone being put in jail. Chen Xiao, I gave you a chance, but you refused to take it. Now it's time for you to bear the result, Gu Ning said in a low voice. Chen Xiao stepped backwards unconsciously in fear. She thought that Gu Ning was going to beat her. What do you want to do? If Gu Ning was really going to punch her, she couldn't fight back at all, so she was terrified. Well, I'm going to make you pay for what you've done to me, Gu Ning said. Delete the post and apologize to me. Also, you have to go to the broadcast room to apologize to me in front of all the students and teachers in our school. No. Chen Xiao refused. It was too embarrassing and shameful. No? It's not up to you now. If you refuse to do so, you'll be punished more severely, Gu Ning sneered. You. Chen Xiao was mad but didn't know how to retort. She wasn't willing to apologize, it was so shameful. If I don't hear your apologies before the afternoon classes are over, you need to be careful about what's going to happen next. Gu Ning warned her. Then she walked away with her friends. Someone already took a video of what had happened in the classroom. He uploaded it to the school forum the second that Gu Ning left. It soon became popular. Some people still doubted Gu Ning's behavior, because she didn't show solid proof that she didn't have a sugar daddy, but more chose to criticize and swear at Chen Xiao. In that case, those negative comments didn't gain much attention. It was ridiculous to jump to the conclusion that Gu Ning had a sugar daddy just because she got out of a luxury car, so most of the people stayed calm and reasonable. In addition, Gu Ning had left a good impression on many students after she had won the competition with Hao Ran and his close friends. Many still admired Gu Ning. Meanwhile, Gu Ning and her friends ignored the mess on the forum because they were enjoying their meal. Before long, Jiang Yuan heard the news from Zhu Pan. He was astonished that Chen Xiao was behind this because Chen Xiao performed so well in his class.
Unfortunately, appearances lead.
Jiang Yuan immediately asked Chen Xiao to do what Gu Ning demanded, because it was Zhu Jian's order too. However, what Chen Xiao had done wasn't as serious as Gu Xiaoxiao, so she wasn't expelled. As long as Chen Xiao apologized, the problem could be easily solved, but if she still refused to do so, she would be expelled like Gu Xiaoxiao. If the student was willing to make up for what she did, the school wouldn't expel her, because it wouldn't do its reputation any good. Under pressure from Jiang Yuan and Zhu Jian, Chen Xiao had to apologize, but in her heart, she hated Gu Ning to death. She swore that she would pay Gu Ning back. When the afternoon classes were about to begin, the post was deleted and was replaced by an apology statement. Then Chen Xiao's voice sounded from the radio. The student from the 4th classroom in 12th grade, Gu Ning, I am Chen Xiao from the 2nd classroom in the 12th grade. It was me who has spread the fake news claiming that you have a sugar daddy. I'm sincerely sorry for what I've done to you. Please accept my apologies. The school burst into discussion. Chen Xiao was famous, no notorious now. This mess was finally settled. After the apology, Chen Xiao felt too ashamed to attend the following classes in her school, so she asked for a leave and went home. Leng Xiaoting kept focusing on the forum, and he noticed that as well. When the classes were over, Gu Ning went back to Fenghua Luxury Mansion. She saw Leng Xiaoting standing outside of Zone C from afar. Because of what had happened today, Leng Xiaoting didn't dare to pick Gu Ning up in case she would get into even more trouble. He even hesitated to walk to her when she appeared in his sight. Gu Ning understood why Leng Xiaoting felt terrible, but it wasn't his fault anyway. She was also willing to let him drive her to school. Gu Ning walked over asking him, "Do you want to dine together?" "Sure." Leng Xiaoting's eyes immediately lit up. Then the two stepped outside. Gu Ning called Gu Man and told her that she wouldn't be eating at home. Leng Xiaoting looked at Gu Ning after she hung up. "Aren't you mad at me?" "Why should I be mad at you?" Gu Ning asked. She understood what Leng Xiaoting was talking about, and she wasn't mad at him at all. "If I hadn't driven you to school this morning, it wouldn't have happened," Leng Xiaoting said. "I was willing to get in your car. If I blamed you for your kindness, no one would treat me kindly in the future," Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was relieved. "What do you want to have?" Gu Ning asked. "Anything you want," Leng Xiaoting answered. "Well then, let's see what choices we have on the road." Gu Ning had no idea what to eat either, so she decided to take a walk along the road. They walked on the Yui Road. There was a restaurant not far away from Fenghua Luxury Mansion. It seemed quiet with a good environment. Thus Gu Ning wanted to give it a try. They chose a table beside the window. After they had ordered the food, Gu Ning asked, "Why do you stay here all day recently? Don't you need to work?" "I'm free when I don't have tasks to fulfill," Leng Xiaoting replied. In the past, he would never have said that. Even if there weren't any tasks, he would find something to do. He wouldn't let himself be free. However, ever since he had fallen in love with Gu Ning, he always wanted to stay by her side when he wasn't occupied. Although they only met once or twice a day and didn't spend a lot of time together, he felt satisfied to be able to see her every day. Well, he of course didn't think that it was enough, but it was so much better than missing her and being lonely. Leng Xiaoting could also deal with his duties through the internet. He didn't need to show up in person for every situation. At that time, Gu Ning's phone rang. It was from Zhou Zhenghong. Gu Ning didn't mind Leng Xiaoting hearing the conversation, so she answered it directly. "Hi, Uncle Zhou. Boss, is it convenient for you now? I have something important to tell you," Zhou Zhenghong asked in excitement. With his acute hearing, Leng Xiaoting could obviously hear Zhou Zhenghong's voice. He also recognized that Zhou Zhenghong was the man who had been with Gu Ning in City G last time. "Sure," Gu Ning said. "We cut out a top-level jade the size of a grown-up's foot. It has two colors which are red and green. The type is called double happiness." Zhou Zhenghong was thrilled. Double happiness? Gu Ning was surprised too. Double happiness was ranked slightly lower than full issue, but was more precious than the violet jade. Gu Ning knew that the raw materials she had picked up were all valuable, but she was happy to hear the good news from Zhou Zhenghong. "Yes, boss, you're amazing," Zhou Zhenghong complimented. He now believed that Gu Ning was more powerful than God, and he couldn't help thinking that Gu Ning probably really had jade eyes and could see the jade inside the raw materials. Of course, he didn't say it aloud, nor believe it. He thought that it was impossible. However, what they couldn't believe was exactly the truth. Leng Xiaoting was amazed that Gu Ning was involved in stone gambling. He knew very little about jade and had no idea what the double happiness was like. But since Zhou Zhenghong said that it was a top-level jade, then it must be priceless. Facing Zhou Zhenghong's endless compliments, Gu Ning smiled but didn't say anything. She knew that she couldn't do it without her jade eyes. "Oh, please use the double happiness to make a pair of pendants. It must actually be two parts of a whole pendant. There should be a dragon and a phoenix on each, which means eternal love. As for the size, medium is fine." Double happiness was the perfect jade to use to make a pair of pendants which stood for love. Hearing the meaning of the pendants, Leng Xiaoting had an idea in mind, but he wouldn't tell Gu Ning right now. "Sure, do you want to keep it yourself? Or show it at the opening ceremony?" Zhou Zhenghong asked. "Show it at the opening ceremony," Gu Ning said. "No problem," Zhou Zhenghong answered. When they were about to hang up, Gu Ning suddenly added, "Oh, I'll be coming in the morning the day after tomorrow." Gu Ning had thought that she better arrive earlier. Although Zhou Zhenghong was completely in charge of the company, she should also give some advice if needed. Jiangsu's construction materials store would open tomorrow, and she had to be there, otherwise she would be flying to City G tomorrow evening. Hearing that Gu Ning was going to City G the day after tomorrow, an idea dawned on Leng Xiaoting. Great. However, the day after tomorrow is a Friday. Don't you need to attend your classes? Zhou Zhenghong was happy to fetch Gu Ning, but was afraid of affecting her studying. After all, Gu Ning was a senior who was going to have her final exams a week later and attend the National College entrance exam after several months. It's fine. I'm so excellent at studying now. Gu Ning joked, but it was the truth. She was confident that she was going to get good scores even if she was absent from all the classes if her teachers allowed her to do that. Haha, very well. Then I'll pick you up in the morning the day after tomorrow. Zhou Zhenghong laughed. He of course believed in Gu Ning. She was a great person with an almighty ability in his opinion. Gu Ning knew that Leng Xiaoting heard the conversation between Zhou Zhenghong and her. But she didn't mind. She told him instead, I'm going to deal with something in City G the day after tomorrow. Well, I was going to tell you that I'll be away on the weekend too, Leng Xiaoting replied. When? Gu Ning asked. She didn't want him to leave her. It said on Saturday, but since you're leaving on Friday, I'll leave on Friday as well, Leng Xiaoting said. He deliberately made it clear that he didn't want to stay here without Gu Ning. Gu Ning didn't know what to say, but felt happy in her heart. May we dine together tomorrow afternoon? Leng Xiaoting asked. My uncle's construction materials store will be opening tomorrow. I'm afraid I won't be free tomorrow, Gu Ning said. Leng Xiaoting nodded. He seemed a little disappointed, which made Gu Ning feel bad. After a second of thought, she added, My plane will be taking off at 8:30 a.m. Can you take me to the airport? Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting's eyes lit up at once. Sure. After the meal, they had a slow walk back to Fenghua Luxury Mansion. Leng Xiaoting walked Gu Ning to the gate of Zone G. He didn't leave until Gu Ning disappeared from his sight. Jiangsu was home no earlier than Gu Ning. He told Gu Ning that the store would open tomorrow. They didn't know many important figures yet, so they had no intention of attracting much attention. Gu Ning instead didn't want the opening ceremony to be so boring. She called in Guangyao later and told him to send 2 baskets of flowers on behalf of Shanghua Real Estate to congratulate Jiangsu. She also told Hao Ran and the others in their WeChat group. They would be there tomorrow too. And Qian received an invitation as well, and she agreed with alacrity. As for Qin Yifan, Gu Ning thought she better not invite him, because it would be embarrassing. However, at that time, Qin Zixuan's family was right in the Qin family home. They were chatting in the hall after the meal. Qin Zixuan didn't know what had happened between Qin Yifan and Gu Ning, so he asked directly, Hey, our boss's family's construction materials store will be opening tomorrow. Will you be attending the ceremony? Hearing that, Qin Yifan was surprised. He had no idea that Gu Ning's family was going to run a construction materials store. Boss? It sounds like a gangster's word. Did you join a gang in your school? Qin Zixuan's father Qin Haoji asked seriously. As an honest government worker, he hated gangs. Qin Zixuan understood his father's temper, so he immediately explained, Of course not. We're just a group of good friends. There is a girl who is extremely good at fighting, so we call her our boss. Hearing that, the Qin family was displeased again. Qin Zixuan's mother, Lu Hanlin, scolded him. Zixuan, the National College entrance exam is just around the corner. Stop playing around all day and focus on your studying. If you fail to get into a prestigious university, our family will be embarrassed. Lu Hanlin valued the reputation of their family the most. Many of her friends' children had attended the examination last year, and all of them had been admitted into a prestigious university. If Qin Zixuan couldn't do the same, it would be a shame to the Qin family. Speaking of studying, Qin Zixuan was upset. Qin Yifan walked away for a while, then came back with a wooden box in his hands. It was as big as half a shoe box. He handed it to Qin Yifan. I'm occupied tomorrow. Please help me send this gold brave troops to her. He wanted to go, but he wasn't invited. Besides, he also didn't know how to face her. What? The gold brave troops? It was completely made of pure gold, and worth over 1,000,000 yuan. Qin Yiqing was shocked. The rest were all astonished as well. Normally, the gifts for the opening ceremony were at the price of a couple dozen thousand yuan at the most. Qin Yifan's present was too expensive. Qin Yifan wore a wry smile. I don't think it's too much. I just invited her to have fun at father's birthday party the other day. But she sent an antique worth several million yuan. 1,000,000 yuan is nothing to her. Hearing that, everyone was amazed. They immediately figured out who Qin Zixuan's boss was. It must be the girl who had sent the antique with Qin Zixuan the other day. However, Qin Haojing still asked to make sure. Is Zixuan's boss the girl named Guning? Yes, our boss is exactly Guning. Not only is she good at fighting, she is also excellent at studying. She's the top one in our grade. Qin Zixuan was proud to introduce his boss. Hearing that it was Guning, Qin Haojing and his wife had mixed emotions, because they were sorry for what Qin Yiqing had done to her. Qin Yiqing also felt uneasy. Qin Yifan still wasn't willing to forgive her because of the drama last time. He always talked to her in a sarcastic way these days. I remember this girl. She is stunning with an air of elegance. I thought that she must be from a super rich family, but I have never heard of an influential family with the family name Gu in City F, Lu Hanlin said. She actually had a good impression of Guning. Both Qin Yifan's parents and Qin Yiqing now knew that although Guning wasn't from a super rich family, she was extraordinarily outstanding. She had made over 100 million yuan at such a young age, but they didn't mention it this time. The next day, Leng Xiaoting ran with Guning to her school as usual, but he deliberately stayed 5 meters behind her. Moreover, he didn't follow her to the school. When they had almost arrived, he went back at once. Guning felt like laughing seeing Leng Xiaoting being so careful. During the break, Guning went to ask for a leave. She told her head teacher that her uncle's store was going to open today, and that she had to be there, and that she also needed to go to City G tomorrow. Zhang Chuhua was slightly displeased. Guning, how come you're always occupied with other things? Do you know that the test is around the corner? I promise it won't affect my studying. I'm terribly sorry to ask for a leave so often, but I have to do so, Guning said. Since Guning made a promise, Zhang Chuhua compromised, but she still reminded her to study hard. If she failed to do so, Zhang Chuhua wouldn't allow her to leave the next time. Oh, Mixi is going to the opening ceremony with me today. Please allow it too, Guning added. Zhang Chuhua was mad, but permitted it in the end. She pushed Guning out with impatience. Go away now and leave me alone. Guning understood that Zhang Chuhua was not really being unkind, so she didn't mind. She thanked her teacher before walking out. The minute Guning was gone, Jiang Yuan stepped in. Seeing that Zhang Chuhua was displeased, he asked with care, Professor Zhang, are you all right? I'm fine. I'm just mad at Guning. The test is around the corner, but she still always asks for a leave, Zhang Chuhua complained. At least she asks for your permission. Chu Peihan in my class would never do that, Zhang Yuan said. In fact, no one dared to restrict Chu Peihan because of her special background. Guning went back to her classroom and told Mixi that they could leave later. Mixi was relieved. Except for Mu Ku and Yi who needed to ask for their teacher's permission, Chu Peihan, Hao Ran and the others all left when they wanted to. It would be strange if they went to ask for permission. Their teachers would be surprised if they did that. When the afternoon classes were finally over, they left their school together and went to buy flowers. Boss, I noticed that Chan Ziao was absent today. Chu Peihan said. She must be too embarrassed to come. Muka laughed. Although she was exposed, I still feel unhappy that I didn't punch her. Chu Peihan said, like she missed something and felt uncomfortable. I agree, Hao Ran said. Alright, beating someone is not always the best way to solve problems. Gu Ning persuaded them. They went to a market to buy 2 baskets of flowers and plants. Before anyone else could pay the bill, Gu Ning did it herself. Then, they went to the construction material market. The flower shop arranged a small truck to take the baskets of flowers and plants to the destination. The truck had space available for 4 people to sit in. Gu Ning let Muku, Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping have a seat in it, while Gu Ning and other girls took a taxi. When Gu Ning arrived at Jiang Su's store, she was totally amazed by the amount of baskets of flowers and plants at the door. Wow, there are so many of them. Weren't we supposed to make it simple? She didn't want it to be so boring, so she had called in Guangyao and Qian and her friends, but there were at least dozens of flower baskets. Gu Ning walked over to read the banners around the baskets. They were all from big companies to congratulate the opening of Shiri Construction Materials Store. She also noticed flower baskets from Shanghua Real Estate and Kamei Beauty Salon. Gu Ning had heard of some of those companies while some she had never heard of. That was because Gu Ning didn't spend much time learning about all the big companies in City F. Other than those from the companies, there were many flower baskets from individuals. And Qian's were among them, and with some, Gu Ning was familiar with their owners. Gu Ning and her friends all wrote down their names on the banners of 8 flower and plant baskets to congratulate the opening of Shiri Construction Materials Store. There weren't many people inside when Gu Ning and her friends walked in, because many had already left after they had sent the gifts. Most of the people who stayed were acquaintances and friends. Although Jiang Su was a truck driver in the past, he knew many businessmen. Since Jiang Su was going to run his own business, they were willing to maintain a good relationship with him. That was the way to build up a network. And Qian was inside with Lu Jingyu. Hi, and Qian Executive Lu. It's so nice to meet you. Gu Ning went over greeting them. Nice to meet you too, Ning Ning. And Qian smiled. Nice to meet you too, Miss Gu. Lu Jingyu said. Uncle, how come there are so many baskets of flowers and plants at the door? Gu Ning asked Jiang Su. Jiang Su answered. I have no idea either. Many have come to congratulate me this morning. I haven't figured it out yet. Oh, they also sent me many red envelopes with a lot of money inside. One of them even wants to cooperate with me. He's going to build a 2-story 300 square meters factory in the suburb. Jiang Su felt like he was in a dream after what he had been through today. It was too good to be true. Gu Ning was astonished too. She immediately realized that someone had arranged it, but who? While Gu Ning was still thinking about her doubts, a new message came into her phone. She checked it. It was from Leng Xiaoting. Gu Ning understood what had happened the minute she read the message. Leng Xiaoting did it. He had arranged for many business partners of Su Jinshan's family to send those gifts. Speaking of that, Su Jinshan was greatly amazed by Leng Xiaoting's request when he received his boss's call. Su Jinshan called Leng Xiaoting every day to ask him when he would be back so that he could leave. Leng Xiaoting said that he would be back soon every time, but he never showed up in front of Su Jinshan, and also refused to tell Su Jinshan where he was. Su Jinshan didn't know that Leng Xiaoting had gone to City F for Gu Ning until he received the call. To Su Jinshan's astonishment, Leng Xiaoting had gone to City F for Gu Ning in person. Su Jinshan intended to gossip about their relationship, but Leng Xiaoting hung up on him right away. Su Jinshan felt hurt and tortured by his curiosity. However, he didn't dare to call Leng Xiaoting again. Damn it! Leng Xiaoting, who had been single for so long, was going to have a girlfriend, while he was still alone. Luckily, Leng Xiaoting allowed him to leave their base so that he could find girls to date, but Leng Xiaoting also warned him to keep the fact that he was in City F a secret. Su Jinshan was at least free now. He planned to go to City F to see how it was going between Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting. On the way back to the capital, he encountered a robbery. When he finally got to the capital, it was too late to get on a plane to City F, so he had to wait till tomorrow. Ling Xiaoting sent a message to Guning to tell her what he had done, in case she would be mad that he hadn't asked for her permission. Guning didn't know what to say. Although she thought that it wasn't necessary for him to do that, she was touched deeply. He arranged it all for her. Guning replied, "How about the deal the man discussed with my uncle?" Ling Xiaoting, "He just happens to be building a factory in the suburb, but he would only discuss with your uncle if he is satisfied with the construction materials." Which meant that the man wanted to cooperate with Jiangsu because he was satisfied with the quality of the construction materials that Jiangsu could supply. That made sense though. The construction materials that Jiangsu had prepared were all of high quality. Most of the reliable buyers would choose Jiangsu to be their provider. Guning replied, "Thanks." Actually, Ling Xiaoting was sitting in his Land Rover not far from the Shuri Construction Materials store. He looked to the direction of the Shuri Construction Materials store. There was a faint smile on his lips. He was happy to see her being happy. Guning then told Jiangsu, "Uncle, these are all from a friend of my friend. He knew that we are holding the opening ceremony today, so he got them to send you some gifts. Please note their names, we can send gifts back to them in the future." "Your friend? What kind of friend? How does he know so many rich people?" Guman asked. This was the first time she had asked Guning about her friends, but it cost too much money this time, and all of them were astonished. Guning knew that she couldn't give her mother a perfunctory answer, so she explained in this way, "He is the friend whose life I saved. We keep in touch now. Mom, you know network matters in business. He is an important figure and he is willing to help me. I don't think I should reject." Hearing that, Guman believed that it was all right. Meanwhile, Qin Zixuan took out a box handing it to Guning. "Boss, my cousin Yifan is occupied today, so he asked me to give this gift to you." "What?" Guning was surprised. She didn't tell Qin Yifan, so how did he know about it? Qin Zixuan must have told him. "Thanks." Guning took it, then gave it to Jiangsu. "Wow." Jiangsu opened it and rounded his eyes in shock when he saw what was inside. "Is this gold?" "This is a brave troops made completely of pure gold. The brave troops is a legendary animal and stood for good wishes in the ancient time. It could accumulate endless fortune into its stomach, but didn't show it at all. It can also bring you good luck and help you run a profitable business," Qin Zixuan explained. "What? Completely made of gold?" Hearing that, everyone was more than shocked. "It must be worth over 1,000,000 yuan at least according to its size. It is so expensive." Jiangsu's hands were trembling a little. He didn't dare to take it. Guning didn't think that it was a big deal. She had sent Qin Yifan's father an antique worth several million yuan last time. Qin Yifan did it this time to show his appreciation. Guning went to Jiangsu's side, comforting him in a quiet voice. "Uncle, please take it. I sent his father an expensive gift at his father's birthday party. It's fine for us to take his gift." Guning said that just to allay Jiangsu's concern. Indeed, Jiangsu relaxed a lot after Guning's comfort. During a break, Guning walked aside to call Qin Yifan. Qin Yifan hesitated to answer it in the beginning, because he didn't know what to say to Guning, but he answered it in the end. "Hi, thank you so much for the gift. I'm sorry I didn't tell you because I was afraid that you would feel uneasy." Guning thanked him before apologizing to him. "It's nothing. I am occupied today anyway," Qin Yifan said airily. Of course it was an excuse. Guning also understood, and she didn't point it out. They soon hung up. In the office, Qin Yifan let his mind wander, fixing his eyes on the phone. He felt sad in his heart because he couldn't forget Guning. In the afternoon, Jiangsu guided his guests to a nearby 5-star hotel to dine together. All the guests has sent him expensive gifts, he absolutely had to treat them well. After the meal it was still early. Guning proposed, Why don't we go and visit Mixie's mother? We haven't visited her in so long. Gu Ning thought that it would be impolite because they hadn't visited Mixie's mother in a week. Oh right. How could we forget? Everyone suddenly realized it afterwards. Is it convenient for you all? Mixie understood that her friends would never visit her mother with empty hands. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. Then they went to the hospital together. They bought a pile of nourishing products before they visited Mixie's mother. Mixie tried to stop them in vain. Mixie's parents were both astonished when they appeared with bags and boxes of nourishing products. Mixie's mother recovered well. Even her chronic disease was cured. She could now live like a normal person. That was the effect of Gu Ning's power. Although Mixie's mother was in good condition now, she had lain in bed for so long and lacked exercise. She still needed to practice to be able to use her limbs well, but she could leave the hospital soon. Mixie's mother thanked Gu Ning endlessly, and almost bent on her knees before Gu Ning after she found out that Gu Ning was the one who had lent the money to her family. To let Mixie's mother have a good rest, Gu Ning and her friends left after 30 minutes. They didn't want to bother Mixie's mother for too long. Mixie wanted to walk them out, but Gu Ning declined. Their homes were in different directions, so they separated at the gate of the hospital. Gu Ning planned to run home. As long as she could run, she wouldn't take a car. But before long, a familiar Land Rover stopped by her side. It was Lung shouting. Gu Ning didn't get in right away, but squinted at Lung shouting. Why are you here? Lung shouting was a little nervous. He didn't dare to meet her eyes, and he knew he shouldn't have followed Gu Ning, but he told her the truth. I've been following you. Why? Gu Ning asked. No reason, I just wanted to follow you, Lung shouting replied. Gu Ning was touched. She wasn't willing to push Lung shouting away from her, so she decided to forget it and got in the car. Have you eaten? Not yet, Lung shouting said. Gu Ning signed resignedly. What do you want to have? Let's go dine together, Gu Ning said. Great. Lung shouting's face lit up. He immediately drove the car ahead. Lung shouting wasn't picky about restaurants, but he chose a fancy one with a romantic ambience when he was with Gu Ning. Although they didn't talk much sitting across each other, they enjoyed being together. Lung shouting ordered a steak, while Gu Ning only ordered a cup of coffee because she had already eaten. Lung shouting frowned a little with obvious dissatisfaction. Aren't you afraid that it'll affect your sleep? Not at all. It has no effect on me, Gu Ning explained. In fact, Gu Ning had her power, so she could fall asleep or stay awake whenever she wanted. Lung shouting didn't insist then. Gu Ning suddenly realized that she totally forgot her plan about the Yuntai mountain, but she didn't have time now and could only wait until she was back from City G. When it was almost 10 p.m., the two left. Lung shouting sent Gu Ning back to Zone G, and as usual didn't leave till she had fully disappeared from his sight. When Gu Ning got home, she noticed that her family were all staring at a bunch of gifts and red envelopes that they had received today. Both Qian and Lu Zhengyu had sent a red envelope of 66,000 yuan, which meant good luck. Shenghua Real Estate had sent 88,000 yuan, which had a good meaning of a thriving business. Kamei Beauty Salon only sent baskets of flowers, because it was their own business. And those who had come for the sake of Lung shouting all sent 66,000 yuan or 88,000 yuan on behalf of their companies. Even the individuals had sent at least a couple dozen thousand yuan each. Similarly, Jiangsu's friends had sent thousands of yuan as well. The most expensive gift was Qin Yifun's Gold Brave Troops, which was worth 1,000,000 yuan. They had received over 1,000,000 yuan in cash today. It was the first time that Jiangsu and others had seen so much cash. Thus they couldn't believe that it was true. Ningning, these are all from your friends. I think you should take them. Jiangsu had already separated the gifts from Gu Ning's network apart. He thought that these belonged to Gu Ning instead of him. No, please take them. You can save them as your fund. Gu Ning declined. But Jiangsu didn't think that it was a good idea. Don't worry. You need to pay those guests back when they invite you to attend a ceremony or something else in the future after all, Gu Ning explained. Leng Xiaoting deliberately helped her uncle build up a network, so he had a chance to maintain the relationship with them. Well, Jiangsu thought for a while and finally agreed. All right then, I'll take them. Oh Mom, I'm leaving for City G tomorrow, Gu Ning said to Gu Man. What are you going to do there? Gu Man asked. She had the feeling that Gu Ning was always busy recently, so she was slightly worried. I need to go over and have a look of my new store. It's going to open this weekend. Gu Ning didn't hide the truth, but didn't give information about the store. Gu Man thought that it was a store ran by Gu Ning and Mu Ku, so she didn't ask further. The next day, Gu Ning left at 7 a.m. Leng Xiaoting was waiting for her at outside of Zone G. Will you be staying in a hotel in City G? Leng Xiaoting asked. Although Leng Xiaoting heard from Chen Meng that he had met Gu Ning at Clean Water Blue Sky, he wasn't sure whether she had stayed in a friend's place or she bought it herself. Not really. I have an apartment at Clean Water Blue Sky in City G. I'll stay there because I'll be flying to City G often in the future, Gu Ning said. All of a sudden an idea dawned on Gu Ning. Did you arrange for people to attend my opening ceremony there the same way you did yesterday? Leng Xiaoting panicked a little but nodded. Gu Ning didn't know what to say. She didn't want him to do that for her, but wasn't willing to turn him down either. Are you mad? Leng Xiaoting asked nervously. Of course not. I just think that it isn't a good idea that you owe others because of me, Gu Ning explained. It's fine. They're all my fellows this time, Leng Xiaoting said. Leng Xiaoting purposely didn't tell Su Jinshan about Gu Ning's business in City G. He had already allowed Su Jinshan to leave their base, and he knew that Su Jinshan would absolutely go to City G if he found out what Gu Ning was doing there. Leng Xiaoting, of course, didn't want him to show up. Gu Ning felt more at ease after Leng Xiaoting's explanation. They arrived at the airport 30 minutes later. Leng Xiaoting sent Gu Ning to the lounge before he left. Zhou Zhenghong called Gu Ning afterwards. Boss, there is a news reporter from News at 6:30 that wants to interview me. Should I accept it? Yes. It's a great opportunity to advertise our brand, Gu Ning answered. Although their advertisement was already popular, she didn't want to miss any chance to promote it. With Gu Ning's permission, Zhou Zhenghong immediately contacted the reporter and accepted it. The reporter who called Zhou Zhenghong was named Ling Shui, and was a news reporter working for the News at 6:30. The show was always high on the ratings. Although the advertisement for the Jade Beauty jewelry had already been aired a few days ago, they weren't Jade lovers, so they didn't think there was a need to have an interview about it. However, the program editor suddenly assigned them a task to interview the boss of the Jade Beauty jewelry and shoot the King's Green. A video of the jade was more attractive than photos. Therefore, Ling Shui noted the number from the advertisement post of the Jade Beauty jewelry and dialed it. The store wasn't open yet, but there were workers to answer the call. A worker immediately told Zhou Zhenghong the news after Ling Shui's call. With Zhou Zhenghong's permission, the worker gave his number to Ling Shui, which was how the two got to know each other. Ling Shui came over the minute that Zhou Zhenghong called her and agreed to have the interview, but reporters weren't allowed to enter the factory, so they had the interview outside. Zhou Zhenghong went in to bring the King's Green to let them shoot. In case any accidents would happen, Chang Qingshan and the others all stopped working and went out with Zhou Zhenghong. Zhou Zhenghong was experienced and he knew how to advertise the brand of Jade Beauty jewelry. Although the news reporter came to them on her own initiative, Zhou Zhenghong still gave the reporter and cameraman a red envelope of 500 yuan each, because the news was to their advantage. As long as they took the red envelopes, they would probably extend the commercial time. Ling Shui told him that if it was possible, they would shoot in the store tomorrow as well. Zhou Zhenghong of course welcomed them because it was free advertisement for them. After the interview, Zhou Zhenghong went to pick Gu Ning up. He locked the king's green into the safe before driving away. Gu Ning turned her phone on the minute she got off the plane. She called Lung shouting at once, but his phone was turned off. Gu Ning understood that Lung shouting was leaving City F today as well, so he was probably on the plane. She then sent him a message and told him that she had a safe arrival. At that time in the airport of City F, Su Jinshin just got off his flight too. He called Lung shouting, but his phone was turned off. Su Jinshin was a little dumbstruck. Is boss leaving today just because I'm coming? It must be that, otherwise he wouldn't turn his phone off. Lung shouting would turn his phone off in only 2 cases. He was in the middle of a task or he was on a plane. His phone was never out of power. As long as he wasn't on a task, he always kept his phone on. Lung shouting wasn't on a task. If he was, Su Jinshin would know about it. Su Jinshin didn't know what to do now. His boss left just when he came. Gu Ning had called Master Fu and his friends before she went aboard the plane. Those masters were thrilled to know that Gu Ning would be in City G this morning. They were excited to see the King's Green. Gu Ning saw Zhou Zhenghong when she came out of the exit of this airport in City G. She called Master Yan, Master Fu and Master Bai, and told them to meet her in the factory area when she got in the car. The 3 masters had gathered together earlier on, looking forward to Gu Ning's arrival. Once Gu Ning called them, they went to the factory area without delay. It took a while longer for Gu Ning to get to the factory, so those masters arrived there earlier than her. They didn't go in right away but instead called Gu Ning. Because Gu Ning would be there within 5 minutes, they decided to wait for her outside. Even if they went in right now, no one would welcome them because nobody knew them. Within 5 minutes, Gu Ning was finally there. Seeing Gu Ning, those masters were all excited, as if they were meeting their own granddaughter. Their aim was actually to see the King's Green, so they urged Gu Ning to go inside when Gu Ning greeted them. Both Zhou Zhenghong and Gu Ning felt like laughing. After registering at the gatekeeper, a group of them walked inside. Master Fu and Master Bai were eager to see the King's Green, and weren't in the mood to visit the factory, but Master Yan, who had less interest in jade, chose to visit the factory first. Gu Ning guided Master Fu and Master Bai to the lounge. Meanwhile, Zhou Zhenghong went to fetch the King's Green. Seeing the King's Green, Master Fu and Master Bai competed with each other to have the first look. Girl Gu, all the jade you have here is precious. Master Yan took a round in the factory and was surprised. Yes, I plan to build a high-end brand so all the jade is above medium-high level, Gu Ning said. That's a very good idea, Master Yan complimented. Master Fu and Master Bai both couldn't put the King's Green down, and both wanted to take it away. After 30 minutes, they finally agreed to leave it in its box. It's so amazing, Master Fu said with jealousy. He himself wanted to cut out the King's Green. Then Master Fu and Master Bai went to have a tour in Gu Ning's factory. They all kept complimenting her when they found out the quality of the jade in this factory. Knowing that Gu Ning alone had cut out all the jade, they were totally amazed. How did you do it? Even God can't be so accurate, but you did it so easily. Master Bai was astonished and couldn't believe it. Gu Ning only smiled but didn't explain further. Master Bai also didn't force Gu Ning to tell him everything. It was Gu Ning's business after all. They knew that they should keep a distance from others' privacy, unless Gu Ning was willing to tell them herself. After the short tour, it was 11:30 a.m. Gu Ning invited them to have a meal together, including Zhou Zhenghong, Chang Qingshan and the others. Master Fu and his friends left after the meal, while Gu Ning and the others went back to the factory. At that time, Gu Ning was finally freed to see the pair of pendants. The one with a dragon on was already finished, but the other one with a phoenix still needed rubbing. Gu Ning took a look at it and was satisfied. Chang Qingshan's carving skill was truly excellent. Chang Qingshan was better than Zhang Rong in hand carving, and Zhang Rong was more skilled at carving with machines, so Gu Ning had asked Chang Qingshan to make the pair of pendants for her. In the afternoon, Gu Ning stayed in the factory. Although she couldn't help them with anything, she absorbed a lot of power. When it was almost 3 p.m., Qin Yifan arrived at the airport in City G. Gu Ning called Sita Yi, inviting him to dine together at 6 p.m. She needed his help. Sita Yi was happy to help her, so he agreed without hesitation. As long as Gu Ning wanted to meet him, even if he wasn't available, he would change his schedule to fit hers. The appointed place was the Huangdang Hotel. Gu Ning ordered a private room and told Sita Yi its number. She arrived at Huangdang Hotel around 5:40 p.m. Sita Yi got there at 5:50 p.m. "So nice to meet you. Please have a seat." Gu Ning welcomed him. Although she knew that Sita Yi was the boss of the Qin gang, she didn't feel nervous. She behaved as usual. After all, she had assumed that he served as a senior leader in the Qin gang in the very beginning. The boss of the Qin gang was of course in a more important position than a senior leader, but the influential officials and the national leader would respect even a senior leader, let alone the boss of the Qin gang, because a senior leader was only ranked lower than the boss. The reason why Gu Ning felt at ease was because Sita Yi treated her in a friendly way. However, she now treated him with more respect. Gu Ning let Sita Yi order first. After the waiter left, Sita Yi asked, "What do you want me to do? You can just tell me." "Well, my jade jewelry store is going to open in City G tomorrow. In case accidents would happen, I want to hire some guards to protect the jewelry and help us with keeping order on site. Do you have any recommendations for good security contractors?" Gu Ning was actually aware that the Qin gang had its own security contractor, but she didn't say it directly, so that she hid the fact that she already knew his real identity. "You're going to open a jade jewelry store?" Sita Yi was surprised. He didn't expect that Gu Ning was able to run a business at such a young age. "Wow, you're really incredible." As for her request, it was nothing to him, so he answered with alacrity, "I have a security contractor myself. How many guards do you need? I can arrange it for you tomorrow." "Really? That would be so great." "I need 10 please," Gu Ning said. "No problem, we're friends."
Situye replied.
In fact, people in gangs valued friendship. As long as you were their friend, they were willing to do their best to help you. Of course, they hated betrayal the most. Once you betrayed them, you were doomed. News at 6:30 aired at 6:30 p.m. when everyone was enjoying their meal or having a rest after dinner. It was great entertainment to eat or rest while watching the show. Xiaoping was lying on the sofa right after his dinner. He turned on the TV watching news at 6:30. He had already known about the recently most popular brand jade beauty jewelry. He was also super jealous of the king's green. He couldn't help thinking to himself, why couldn't I have cut out the king's green and won a fortune? Besides, the jade beauty jewelry was a high-end brand using jade from the medium-high level and above. His Zhoufu jewelry couldn't even provide several medium-level jade, and mainly used the medium-low or low-level jade. His brand had barely 200 million yuan in assets, and was becoming less popular. He also understood that it was because he had replaced Zhou Zhenghong to be the new boss of Zhoufu jewelry. His behavior affected the brand of Zhoufu jewelry. Xiaoping didn't want to accept the truth, but he had to face it. He still had no idea that Zhou Zhenghong was in charge of the jade beauty jewelry, or he would have been totally shocked. However, before long he indeed was shocked, because Zhou Zhenghong appeared on news at 6:30 with the king's green in his hands. His title was the chairman of the Jade Beauty Jewelry Company. Xiaoping jumped up from the sofa, rounding his eye in shock. "No, it's impossible."
Impossible.
Xiaoping refused to believe it. His wife, who was in the kitchen washing dishes, heard his angry voice and came running out to him. "What happened?" "Zhou Zhenghong is the chairman of the Jade Beauty Jewelry Company. Can you believe it?" Xiaoping pointed at the TV. "What? That's impossible." Mrs. Xiao almost couldn't accept it, but the news playing on the TV made it very clear. Mrs. Xiao had also heard of the jade beauty jewelry. She had even told her friends that she would be going to have a look tomorrow. Women love jade after all. Although her husband ran a jewelry company, that jewelry wasn't of good quality and was barely comparable to Jade Beauty jewelry. However, she had no idea who was the boss of the Jade Beauty jewelry back then. So when she found out that Zhou Zhenghong was the boss, she was so shocked that she wasn't even aware that her dishwashing cloth fell onto the ground. Where did he get the money? Where the hell did he get the jade? Xiaoping couldn't figure it out. He didn't believe that Zhou Zhenghong was able to collect that much money in jade in a short time. But Zhou Zhenghong was the chairman of the Jade Beauty jewelry all of a sudden. Xiaoping was deeply confused. Usually the chairman was the most influential boss in an enterprise, so Xiaoping didn't know that there was a big boss behind Zhou Zhenghong. No, I can't accept it. I can't. Zhou Zhenghong almost screamed in anger. Honey, don't you know Leader Hu in the Qin gang? Why don't we turn to him for help? Mrs. Xiao proposed an evil plan. She understood that once Zhou Zhenghong became successful again, he would get revenge on them. Right. We can ask Leader Hu for help. Xiaoping immediately called Leader Hu, but Leader Hu refused to do them a favor, saying that their boss was doing a full-scale investigation in their gang recently, and that he didn't dare to receive money in private. Although Xiaoping called him Leader Hu, he was only the head of a small group. Xiaoping was mad, but didn't dare to say another word, because he didn't want to annoy the man and cause himself the trouble. However, Leader Hu also recommended some hoodlums to Xiaoping. Those hoodlums didn't serve in the Qin gang, so they weren't restricted. Xiaoping agreed. When the news at 6:30 was on air, Qin Yifan was in the Li family's house. Both he and Li Jianyu's family were astonished by the fact that Zhou Zhenghong was the chairman of Jade Beauty jewelry. Did Zhou Zhenghong cut out the king's green? How come I heard nothing of it from the street of stone gambling? And the Jade Beauty jewelry is a high-end brand. Where did he get the money and the jade? Li Jianyu's father Li Jiong was shocked as well as confused. He, who also worked in the jewelry industry, had heard of what had happened to Zhou Zhenghong, so what was happening now was very surprising. Qin Yifan instead had a different opinion. He recognized that Zhou Zhenghong was the man who had been with Gu Ning last time in the street of stone gambling. And Gu Ning was so talented in stone gambling. Thus Qin Yifan thought that the king's green must be Gu Ning's. He even had the thought that Gu Ning had something to do with the Jade Beauty jewelry. Thinking of that, Qin Yifan couldn't help but take a long breath in. If so, Gu Ning would be too incredible. Those were all his guesses, but those could all be true. He would have called Gu Ning and asked her if they didn't have an awkward relationship now. The competition among businessmen who were involved in the same industry was fierce, especially between peers. Li Jewelry had 300 million yuan more than Zhoufu Jewelry in assets, but the jewelry they provided was at the same level. They both had gold, silver, platinum and diamond on sale. Li Jewelry just had more medium-level jade than Zhoufu Jewelry. The Li family maintained a good relationship with the Qin family. The Itsue Jade Store was also a famous store which had a history of 100 years, mainly selling jade of medium and above levels. Thus Li Jewelry had benefited from it to some extent. Zhoufu Jewelry was valued less than Li Jewelry, but it was always popular. So the Li family and Zhou Zhenghong had been competitors. Li Jiong obviously wouldn't attend the opening ceremony of Jade Beauty jewelry, but he was quite curious about it. Although Li Jewelry wasn't comparable to Jade Beauty jewelry in the levels of jade, he decided to find out more about Jade Beauty jewelry. Therefore, Li Jiong asked Li Jianyu to have a look in the Jade Beauty jewelry store tomorrow. Qin Yifan came to City Ji for Jade Beauty jewelry, so he would naturally be going there. And Li Zhenjin would also attend the opening ceremony because of Qin Yifan. Although Qin Yifan had refused her and broken her heart, she couldn't forget him. She still wanted to try. Their relationship was already so bad that to make it worse made no real difference. After the airing of news at 6:30, it caused a sensation in City Ji. Many people who knew Zhou Zhenghong were greatly shocked by the news that he was the chairman of Jade Beauty jewelry. Although they had the same thoughts as Li Jiong, nobody knew the answers. However, at the same time, those who had had a good relationship with Zhou Zhenghong before, and had alienated him after his bankruptcy, now called him continuously to congratulate him in order to restore their connection. Zhou Zhenghong treated them politely. He didn't hate them because they had all abandoned him. Business was business after all. Zhou Zhenghong understood why they turned to him now, and he would also make full use of them too. Thus, as long as they didn't hurt him deliberately, he wouldn't be emotional. He wouldn't hurt others on purpose either. Zhou Zhenghong always competed with others equally in business. Unless the other part used immoral tricks in the first place, he would never scheme against others. Gu Ning also had a great meal with Sitiyi. Sitiyi proposed giving Gu Ning a ride back after the meal. Gu Ning declined at first, but Sitiyi insisted, so in the end she agreed to let Sitiyi drive her back to the processing plant. The opening ceremony would be held tomorrow, but they hadn't delivered the jewelry to the store yet. They had to finish the delivery tonight and lay the jewelry in their places. When Gu Ning got back to the processing plant, it was almost 8 p.m. They had already packed the jewelry up and were waiting for Gu Ning. A group of them, Gu Ning included, loaded the car with the packed jewelry, driving to the store afterwards. All the store workers had already cleaned the store while waiting for the jewelry. They started to place the jewelry after Gu Ning and others arrived. When it was almost 10 p.m., Gu Ning received a message from Leng shouting. Leng shouting, "What are you doing now?" Gu Ning, "Placing the jewelry in my store. How about you?" Leng shouting, "I'm at the airport in the capital leaving for another city to deal with something." Gu Ning, "Take care." They didn't finish placing the jewelry until it was past 12 p.m. And then they went to the meeting room. Except for Zhou Zhenghong, Chang Qingshan, Wang Zhiyong and Zhang Rong. No one else knew that Gu Ning was the real boss, so Gu Ning let Zhou Zhenghong hold the meeting. However, she still attended the meeting as a shareholder. She also told the staff to keep it a secret between them to avoid any trouble. Everyone thought that Gu Ning didn't want others to know her identity because of her young age, and promised to keep it quiet. Moreover, all the workers were kind and upright people. They didn't think that there was an immoral relationship between Zhou Zhenghong and Gu Ning just because she had shares of Jade Beauty Jewelry Company at such a young age. All of a sudden, Gu Ning heard some noise outside, so she adjourned the meeting. Everyone was confused, looking to Gu Ning. Gu Ning said to a male worker beside her in a low voice, "Go check the surveillance cameras for outside." The man immediately realized that something must be wrong, so he ran to the surveillance room and checked the cameras. Gu Ning had jade eyes and was able to see what was happening out there, but she didn't want anyone else to know that, so she could only send a worker to check the surveillance cameras first and tell the others afterwards. Before long, the male worker came back with an upset face. "There is a MP1 outside. Over a dozen men got out of it with steel sticks in their hands, and they are staring at our store now." The news caused horror in the crowd. All the workers in the room understood that the store was in trouble. Although the store was alarmed and couldn't be easily robbed, it would affect the opening ceremony tomorrow if its outside was damaged. "I'll handle it," Gu Ning said, standing up. "What?" Everyone was shocked and looking at Gu Ning. They couldn't believe their ears. "She is going to handle it? She is merely a teenage girl. Are you sure you can handle it?" Only Zhou Zhenghong believed that Gu Ning wasn't joking, but he was still worried. "Of course," Gu Ning replied with confidence. Everyone was surprised again. Can she fight? However, they also knew that Gu Ning had to have a plan, or she wouldn't do it. "I'll go too." 2 guards stood up at once. As security guards, they ought to protect the store if any accidents happened. Both of the 2 security guards were strong boys around 27 years old. One was named Kuing and the other was Chao Hua. "Very well. Please be careful," Gu Ning said to them. She could actually handle it alone, but since she hired them, they had to do their jobs. In addition, Gu Ning also wanted to test their ability with this chance. "I'll go too." Chang Qingshan and the others knew that Gu Ning was good at fighting, but they didn't know how good she was. Thus they couldn't let her, a teenage girl, handle it alone. It's fine. You can stay here, Gu Ning ordered. However, it was an emergency. They weren't willing to hide inside. Chang Qingshan and others wanted to argue, but was stopped by Zhou Zhenghong. Zhou Zhenghong told them that Gu Ning was excellent at kung fu, and that they could end up being her burden if they went outside. Since Zhou Zhenghong said so, they chose to believe him. No one wanted to cause more problems. In fact, Gu Ning was happy to know that they were willing to stand up for her in an emergency. They truly had their loyalty to her, and they were all reliable people. One MPV stands for a multi-purpose vehicle, and is usually a large hatchback with seating for 6 or more passengers. There were several steel sticks in the store for emergencies in the future, but unexpectedly they came in handy before the opening ceremony. The 3 of them went to the door with a steel stick in their hands. There were 3 keys to this store. Gu Ning and Zhou Zhenghong each had one, and the last one was in the hands of the store manager. Gu Ning didn't allow the 2 boys to come near, so she opened the door herself. There were 2 doors. The inside one was a bulletproof glass door, and the one outside was an aluminum alloy rolling door. The glass door was transparent, so there was a layer of curtain to cover it. Outside, over a dozen hoodlums were about to damage the door. At the same time, the rolling door rose up slowly, and those at the front were surprised. However, they didn't think that the people inside had discovered them. They believed that they were going home, and had accidentally opened the door. Those hoodlums couldn't see what was happening inside, but the lights were on, so they knew that there were people in it. However, they didn't care. Now, since someone opened the door, they were more than excited to rob the jewelry and make a fortune. Thus they stopped and waited to dash in after the door was fully open. Gu Ning saw it clearly with her jade eyes, and she immediately understood their plan. At short notice, a person violently attacked those hoodlums from a nearby side. And those hoodlums were all beaten down, screaming in pain. However, Gu Ning rounded her eyes at the sight of the familiar man. Leng Xiaoting? Why is he here? Isn't he supposed to be in another city dealing with something? Gu Ning suddenly realized that Leng Xiaoting actually came to City G for her. She was deeply touched by the surprise. People inside the store all heard the agonized shouts from outside, and they were all confused. Once the rolling door was rolled up, Gu Ning opened the glass door without hesitation, dashing ahead. She kicked a hoodlum away and hit another's leg with the steel stick before they could react. The 2 hoodlums shouted in great pain. Both Kuing and Chao Hua, who followed behind Gu Ning, were astonished by the scene before their eyes. This young teenage girl was even better than them at fighting. Kuing and Chao Hua were also amazed by the man who had attacked the hoodlums. The man had an air of a king. If they guessed correctly, the man must be a top player in the military. After a few seconds of shock, they ran over, immediately fighting with the hoodlums. Although they were just normal retired soldiers, they had been trained professionally for many years, and it was easy for them to deal with those hoodlums. People inside the store didn't dare to come out yet, so they went to watch the surveillance cameras. Except for Zhou Zhenghong, the rest were all amazed by Gu Ning's movements. She is so awesome. And the man who suddenly appeared is amazing too. Kuing and Chao Hua are also doing well. Within a short time, the hoodlums were all beaten down on the ground, and could barely stand up. Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning knocked most of them down because they were so strong and were able to beat them down one down at a time. Gu Ning came to Leng Xiaoting asking him, "Why are you here? Didn't you tell me that you needed to deal with something?" Gu Ning asked the question on purpose. Although she was surprised and moved by his sudden presence and help, she was unhappy that he didn't tell her the truth. Leng Xiaoting panicked a little. "I did go to the capital to deal with something, then I came here." In case Gu Ning wouldn't believe him, Leng Xiaoting added at once, "I have my plane ticket as proof. It's in my car." Saying that, Leng Xiaoting was going to fetch the ticket to show Gu Ning. Gu Ning immediately stopped him. It's fine, I believe you. Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting relaxed. The people inside the store saw that the problem was solved from the surveillance cameras and walked out one by one. Seeing that the hoodlums were all beaten down on the ground moaning in pain with blood around their bodies, they all drew a long breath in like they could feel the pain too. Zhou Zhenghong's sight fell on Leng Xiaoting. He was curious about who this man was, but he didn't ask the question because he knew it wasn't a right time to do so. All right, let's deal with these people first. Gu Ning looked at the hoodlums. Those hoodlums trembled in fear in her cold glance. It was beyond their imagination that these people who worked in this store were so excellent at fighting. They were all masters of kung fu. Who sent you? Gu Ning asked angrily. Those hoodlums exchanged glances, but hesitated to tell the truth. I don't have patience. If you don't tell me the truth, you can't bear the result, Gu Ning threatened. Please don't. Their head immediately opened his mouth. They were merely jobless hoodlums, who didn't have any sense of loyalty. It was nothing before their life. It's the boss of Zhoufu Jewelry, Xiaoping, who sent us here, the leading hoodlum said. What? Xiaoping? Hearing that, Zhou Zhenghong was extremely displeased. He now deeply understood what Gu Ning had told him. If he wanted to start his own business again, Xiaoping would ruin it before he even began. Luckily, he had Gu Ning as his support, so Xiaoping tried in vain. Are you sure? Gu Ning fixed her eyes at him, asking coldly. Not because she didn't believe it, but she just wanted to confirm it. It was universally known that Zhou Zhenghong and Xiaoping didn't get along. Thus it was possible that someone would deliberately use Xiaoping's name to damage Zhou Zhenghong's business. Xiaoping was Zhou Zhenghong's enemy, and Gu Ning would help Zhou Zhenghong to get revenge on him. But anyone who wanted to damage Jade Beauty Jewelry, she absolutely wouldn't let them get away with it. It was him. He has a good connection with Leader Hu in the Qing gang. He planned to get Leader Hu to help him, but Leader Hu refused because the Qing gang won't allow him to do that. Thus he introduced us to Xiaoping. The leading hoodlum told Gu Ning the details in case she wouldn't believe him. Seeing that the hoodlum was being sincere, Gu Ning believed his explanation. How much did they pay you? Gu Ning asked. 50,000 yuan. The hoodlum answered. What? Only 50,000 yuan? He is truly mean. Gu Ning sneered with disdain. Fine, you can all go now. Gu Ning let them go since they were useless now. Hearing that, the hoodlums immediately ran away. Uncle Zhou, do you know Xiaoping's address? What kind of car does he drive? And do you know the plate number? Gu Ning asked Zhou Zhenghong. Zhou Zhenghong understood that Gu Ning was going to cause Xiaoping trouble. He was afraid that she would do something against the law, and was about to persuade her. They all agreed that they had to teach Xiaoping a lesson, but they were also concerned that Gu Ning would commit a crime. However, before Zhou Zhenghong could open his mouth, Gu Ning interrupted him. Relax, I just want to do something to his car, and punish him slightly. Zhou Zhenghong relaxed then. He understood that once Gu Ning made up her mind, no one could change it. Although Xiaoping did it because of him, the Jade Beauty Jewelry was Gu Ning's brand. If Xiaoping wanted to ruin Jade Beauty Jewelry, he would have bad blood with Gu Ning. He had indeed annoyed Gu Ning now. Therefore Zhou Zhenghong said to Gu Ning, he lives in number 1003, Building 7, Harmonious Home on XX Road. He drives a black BMW, and its plate number is G332. Is there any spray paint or glue left after the decoration of our store? Gu Ning asked. Yes, we have white spray paint and superglue, the manager said. Give them to me, Gu Ning said. The manager immediately ran inside to fetch them. Before long, he came out with a paper bag with 3 bottles of spray paint and 2 bottles of superglue in it. Gu Ning took them saying, All right, it's late now. I think you better stay in the store and have a rest for the sake of your safety. After that, she left with Leng Xiaoting. Leng Xiaoting understood where Gu Ning was heading to. So he drove straight to the address of Xiaoping's home. Leng Xiaoting wasn't familiar with the roads in City G, so he used GPS. There weren't many cars on the road in the early morning, and they arrived at the harmonious home within 20 minutes. What do you want to do? Let me help you, Leng Xiaoting said. I prefer to do it myself, Gu Ning declined. Leng Xiaoting felt a little disappointed, but he understood, so he didn't insist. Gu Ning wasn't willing to see Leng Xiaoting being upset, like she just had hurt him. After a second thought, Gu Ning asked him, "Can you disable the surveillance cameras in this area for me?" "Sure." Leng Xiaoting's face immediately lit up. It was a piece of cake for him to do that. Then without delay the two worked separately. Leng Xiaoting went to the surveillance room to turn off the cameras first before he sent Gu Ning a message of success. Gu Ning strode directly to Building 7 afterwards. She slid into the underground parking lot, finding Xiaoping's car. Then she used the white spray paint, aiming it at his black car, and turned it completely white. She next pulled out tools which she had prepared for her adventure at Yuntai Mountain, from her jade eyes to deflate its 4 tires. Later, she violently levered the door open and removed the steering wheel. After that, Gu Ning took the elevator up to the 10th floor. She stood at the door of apartment number 03. Taking out the superglue, she filled the narrow gap between the door and the ground with superglue. At last, she sprayed the rest of the spray paint around the door randomly. The door was totally ruined now. Gu Ning was satisfied and left right away. When she got back in the car, Leng Xiaoting asked with curiosity, "What did you do?" Gu Ning told him everything. The man lifted the corner of his lips. He could imagine Xiaoping's shocked face when he failed to open the door and saw his car tomorrow. "Where to now?" Leng Xiaoting asked. "Where are you staying?" Gu Ning asked. "In a hotel," Leng Xiaoting replied. "Can you drive me back to clean water blue sky before you go back to the hotel?" Gu Ning asked. Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was slightly upset. They had just met each other, and now she wanted him to leave without spending more private time with him. That left him in a bad. After a while, Leng Xiaoting said to her, "I haven't eaten yet." Gu Ning was surprised, but she got hungry too when Leng Xiaoting said that. "Well, then let's have night snacks together." "Great," Leng Xiaoting said, immediately cheering up. Many night snack stands were open 24 hours a day, and it was only 2 a.m. It was the time when most bar lovers who had just come out of a bar went to have something to eat. Although Leng Xiaoting was allergic to seafood, he could eat fish, so they went to have roasted fish. It seemed like the two had a secret agreement to eat slowly until daybreak. After the night snack, it was almost 4 a.m. It was too late to go back and sleep, but what should they do next? They weren't a couple yet, so there were many things that they couldn't do. The atmosphere in the car started to get embarrassing. All of a sudden, Gu Ning had an idea. "Well, why don't we have a drive around City G? I want to get familiar with it." Yes, Gu Ning thought that she should be familiar with City G. And with her unique memory, she could bear everything that she saw along the way in mind. Leng Xiaoting didn't know what to do either, so he happily agreed with Gu Ning. He drove the car ahead, moving along the street. At that time, there were drunk people in 2s and 3s arguing and playing with each other on the streets. And the sanitation workers were already doing their job cleaning the streets. Without warning, there was a burst of sound from a noisy engine behind them. In the rearview mirror, they saw 3 cars driving at an extremely high speed racing towards them. If Gu Ning guessed correctly, they were Matt Rempitson. While the 3 cars were passing by Leng Xiaoting's, the people sitting inside lifted their middle fingers towards them. Those who sat in the 3 cars all did the same thing. Both Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning were mad. "Let's surpass them."
Kuningsaid koldli.
Leng Xiaoting immediately sped up, chasing them. In the 3 cars were young men in their early 20s. They noticed that Leng Xiaoting was catching up to them from the rearview mirror, and were surprised, but they soon felt that it was interesting and exciting. They didn't believe that Lung shouting was able to catch up to them. Thus a young man stretched his head from a car shouting at Lung shouting, "Come on, baby. If you can catch up to us, I'll call you my grandpa." Both Lung shouting and Gu Ning heard it clearly. Gu Ning said with determination, "Let's do it. I'll beat them down to the ground." They had insulted them, and Gu Ning would never let them get away with it. Lung shouting drove a Porsche which was worth 2 million yuan. It wasn't a cheap car, but was slightly cheaper than their professional sports cars which were at the price of 4 million yuan. Lung shouting was a skillful driver who drove fast and steadily, so he soon caught up to them. The young men in the sports cars were surprised that Lung shouting did it so easily. Although they sped up, Lung shouting still caught up to them in a few seconds, which greatly upset them. However, the more annoyed they felt, the more they failed to drive well. One mat rempits is a Malaysian term for an individual who participates in immoral activities and public disturbance with a motorcycle as their main transport. Within a short time, Lung shouting's Porsche was ahead of all of them. He stopped the car right across the middle of the road. Although it was a 3-lane road, there happened to be a big truck parked in one of the lanes. Lung shouting's car occupied the other 2 lanes, and left no space for them to drive through. Not unless they drove through Lung shouting's car. The young men in the 3 cars were swearing loudly, but they had to stop their cars quickly. However, they were reluctant to admit their failure, so the first car turned around planning to drive away, but it knocked into the second car. The owners of these 2 cars didn't get along with each other. They had drunk today and were easily annoyed. After the accident, an argument was about to begin. The owner of the second car got out of it walking to the first car swearing, "Li Feng, what the F*** have you done?" Li Feng left his car and he was mad too. "Marini, what the F*** do you think you are that you are yelling at me? I didn't do it on purpose after all. I can pay you. I don't lack your compensation at all. I just F*** hate you." Li Feng raised his voice. The owner of the third car walked over at that time, criticizing them. "It's no big deal. Why are you arguing so loudly? Calm down." "Wei, it's not me who doesn't want to calm down. I just can't stand this shit any longer. He slept with my girl. I didn't say anything, but as long as he's present, my girls are seduced by him every time. Do you think I can tolerate that?" Marini clenched his teeth in anger. Gu Ning was struck dumb. She didn't expect to hear such a dramatic story. She felt like laughing, but to be honest, the man called Li Feng was indeed much more handsome than the man named Marini. Or to be more specific, the man named Marini wasn't good-looking at all. He was only 168 centimeters tall, and a little fat with a plain face. And the man called Li Feng was 186 centimeters tall with a standard body. He wasn't very handsome but wasn't plain either. Moreover, he dressed well and looked charming like a typical playboy. Women were always attracted by bad boys. So it was understandable that Marini's girls would end up sleeping with Li Feng. They seduced me themselves, alright? It wasn't my fault. Could you resist the temptation if they turned you on? And I rejected them all afterwards. You couldn't keep them interested in you. And you can't blame me for that. Li Feng retorted with disdain. He despised Marini because he failed to get his girls to stay by his side. Although Marini was plain, he was rich. So many pretty young girls were still willing to play with him. But once they found out that Li Feng was both handsome and rich, they naturally turned to him. Li Feng F***you. Marini was annoyed by shame. He raised his fist to punch Li Feng. Li Feng also had been wanting to beat Marini for a long time. He didn't think that it was his fault that girls all left Marini for him. If Marini hadn't been Wei Feihong's friend too, he would have punched him already. Now since Marini wanted to fight with him in first place, he wouldn't hesitate. Wei Feihong, who was the owner of the third car, wanted to stop them, but was also afraid that they would hurt him, so he could only shout it from the side. "Stop now, both of you. However, Ma Rennie and Li Feng had already lost their minds. They only wanted to punch the other to death, and no one would listen to Wei Feihong. The two were soon in a violent fight. It seemed that they indeed hated each other badly. Leng Xiaoting had followed Gu Ning in getting out of the car earlier on. Gu Ning enjoyed watching the two fight with her arms across her chest. Although they weren't good at fighting at all, it was funny to see that they were black and blue. Wei Feihong noticed Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting, and was stunned by their outstanding appearance. He wasn't interested in Leng Xiaoting, although the man was extraordinarily handsome, so he quickly ignored Leng Xiaoting. His sight fell on Gu Ning then, and he leered at her. Leng Xiaoting gave him a cold glance which frightened Wei Feihong. He was scared by the man's look. It was so terrifying. Leng Xiaoting was so mad that the man was leering at Gu Ning. It was an insult to Gu Ning. Gu Ning was of course displeased at Wei Feihong's look as well. She walked towards Wei Feihong step by step, followed by Leng Xiaoting. Wei Feihong unconsciously moved backwards in horror. However, he soon realized that it was very shameful to do that, so he calmed himself down. However, Leng Xiaoting's look still made him feel uncomfortable, as if Leng Xiaoting was his boss. He asked with dissatisfaction, "What do you want to do? Didn't you say that once we catch up to you, you'll call us your grandpa? Now we did it, it's time for you to call us grandpa," Gu Ning said in a proud and casual way, looking at him like he was a loser. "You?" Wei Feihong was mad. However, he soon sneered. "Of course. However, when I said catch, I actually meant that if you sleep with me, I'll call you whatever you want in my bed." Wei Feihong not only denied it, but also humiliated Gu Ning. Both Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning were irritated now. Before Gu Ning could do anything, Leng Xiaoting directly kicked Wei Feihong away. He heavily fell onto his own car with a loud crash. The front cover of the car caved in by the great force. Wei Feihong had been kicked in the stomach, and was already in great pain, and then he hit the car heavily. It was too painful for him to utter a word. Because of the loud sound, Ma Rennie and Li Feng immediately focused on Wei Feihong, and both were shocked. Wei. Although Ma Rennie and Li Feng were also black and blue, they couldn't leave Wei Feihong alone because of his background. If he was injured while they were together, Wei Feihong's father would never let them get away with it. That being the case, Ma Rennie and Li Feng stopped fighting with each other, and ran to Wei Feihong at once. "How dare you kick Wei? Do you know who he is?" Ma Rennie looked to Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning, threatening them. Wei Feihong's background wasn't simple. Seeing that Ma Rennie was black and blue and had an angry look, Gu Ning thought that it was hilarious. She almost laughed out loud. "Oh, so who is he?" she asked. Gu Ning didn't care about his background. Even if he was the son of the governor of this province, Gu Ning would beat him as always. Gu Ning's attitude annoyed Ma Rennie and Li Feng. Wei's father is a senior leader of the Xuanwu branch in the Qing gang. You've hurt Wei, and you can't bear the result. The Xuanwu branch was in charge of the different kinds of legal businesses of the Qing gang. Wei Feihong's father, Wei Jiming, was the general manager of all the entertainment places in City Ji on behalf of the Qing gang. He was indeed a senior leader in the Xuanwu branch, but was only a manager among the Qing gang. Wei Jiming might be an influential figure to others, but he was nothing to Gu Ning. "So what? Even if your boss was here, I'm not afraid of him either," Gu Ning said airily, like the Qing gang was merely nothing in her eyes. "You." Ma Rennie and Li Feng were mad. They didn't expect that this young girl was so bold that she wasn't even afraid of the Qing gang, but they thought that Gu Ning behaved like that because she had no idea of the power of the Qing gang. "You're just being naive. Don't you dare leave," Li Feng said angrily. He took out his phone calling for help. "Why should I listen to you? We're leaving, and what can you do?" Gu Ning said with disdain, and left with Leng Xiaoting. Although she wasn't afraid of them, it didn't mean that she would stay as they wanted. Why should she listen to them? Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting were leaving, But Ma Rini and Li Feng indeed had no idea how to stop them. They could only watch them disappearing from sight. They couldn't beat them in a fight after all, and they were all injured, but they still yelled at their backs, "Let's go and see. You'll pay for it." At that time it was almost 6 a.m., and the sky started to light up. It was winter, so the dawn came late. If it had been summer, the sky would be completely bright already. There were more and more cars on the roads now, and many people were running in the morning. They drove on the road for a while longer. The sky was completely bright at 7 a.m., so Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting went to the store. When they arrived at the store, it was already open. Zhou Zhenghong arranged the workers to have breakfast in shifts. Gu Ning was busy causing Xiaoping trouble last night, so she hadn't introduced Leng Xiaoting to Zhou Zhenghong yet. Zhou Zhenghong was her most important assistant, and it was necessary to introduce them to each other. "Uncle Zhou, this is my friend Leng Xiaoting," Gu Ning said to Zhou Zhenghong, then turned to Leng Xiaoting. "This is the executive boss of my jewelry company, Zhou Zhenghong." Zhou Zhenghong and Leng Xiaoting greeted each other. Zhou Zhenghong asked Gu Ning about what she had done to Xiaoping. Not only Zhou Zhenghong but the others were also curious about it. Gu Ning didn't hide the truth. She told them everything, and everyone felt satisfied. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting hadn't had breakfast yet, but they had eaten at night, so they were full now. It was the first time that all the female workers in the store had seen such a handsome man like Leng Xiaoting. They couldn't help glancing at him, but nobody had any illusions about him because they were a little in awe of him. Xiaoping woke up early this morning. He called the leading hoodlum who he had hired to damage the Jade Beauty jewelry store, but no one would answer. He tried calling the other hoodlums later, but it was still the same. Xiaoping was mad for a long while. Nobody answered his calls, so he stopped calling. He hoped that they would call him back later. Then he planned to leave his home and have a look at the Jade Beauty jewelry store himself. But when he tried to open the door in vain countless times, he roared in anger. "What the F***ck is going on now? The door won't open." His wife was woken up by the noise. She walked out and heard Xiaoping's angry voice. "What? The door won't open? What's wrong with it?" Mrs. Xiao immediately went to open the door, but she also tried in vain. "What happened?" she asked with anxiety. "How would I know? Call the property company right now." Xiaoping shouted in anger. Mrs. Xiao went to call them at once. Harmonious Home was a medium-level living area with good service provided by the property company. Especially when Mrs. Xiao called them, they sent people to help without delay. Then they found out that someone had poured superglue in the gap and sprayed white paint around the door. The door was merely a waste now, and had to be removed. Xiaoping was in a rage. He didn't understand who would do that to him. He asked the worker from the property company to check the surveillance cameras, but the tape was broken. Xiaoping almost went crazy, but he still had to call someone to replace the door. About an hour later, the repairer came to remove the door. Xiaoping told his wife to stay in the house before he left. However, when Xiaoping got to the underground parking lot and found out that his car was badly damaged, he fainted because of the anger. The Jade Beauty jewelry store would hold its opening ceremony at 10 a.m. The 10 security guards that Sita Yi had arranged for Gu Ning had already arrived at 9 a.m. Meanwhile, Sita Yi called Gu Ning to congratulate her. Because of Sita Yi's special identity, he couldn't come to the opening ceremony in person. Thus he could only call Gu Ning. Leng Xiaoting misunderstood and thought that Sita Yi was chasing Gu Ning too, so he disliked Sita Yi from the very beginning. Therefore, when he heard that the call was from Sita Yi, he got nervous all of a sudden. Although Gu Ning seemed to treat Sita Yi like a common friend, Leng Xiaoting was still mad at the fact that Gu Ning had turned to Sita Yi for help. Gu Ning of course sensed his unhappiness. She understood what was on his mind. He must be unhappy about what Sita Yi had done for her. Gu Ning hung up and asked, "What's wrong? Why didn't you tell me you need guards?" Leng Xiaoting asked with dissatisfaction. You said that you were busy, so I didn't want to bother you, Gu Ning replied. She actually hadn't known that she could turn to Leng Xiaoting for help. Instead, she thought that it would be more convenient if Sita Yi was willing to help, since his gang was based in City G. Leng Xiaoting now regretted that he had lied to Gu Ning, but he still argued, even if I'm not here, I can still help you. Indeed, whether he came to City G or not, it was easy for him to arrange security guards for Gu Ning. He only needed to make a call. I promise I'll come to you if I need anything the next time. Please don't be upset. Gu Ning comforted him. Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was finally cheered up. Great. The most noticeable feature of this opening ceremony was the King's Green. So they left a large empty space in the middle of the store to place the King's Green for people to appreciate it. It was locked in a glass box with a guard beside it. There were people gathering around gradually. Some were here to have a look, while some came to congratulate Zhou Zhenghong. Ling Shui and a cameraman had arrived earlier to find out who the guests were. Master Yan, Master Fu and Master Bai arrived at almost the same time, because they had an agreement to set off together. Yan Zhenglin, the mayor of City Ji, came along with his father. Master Yan and Bai Linwei arrived with his father Master Bai. The arrival of these important figures immediately caused a sensation. Nobody knew when Zhou Zhenghong had such a close relationship with those influential people in City G. Gu Ning was only a random customer today. She didn't show up with any title at Jade Beauty Jewelry. Master Fu and the others were aware of that, so they only congratulated Zhou Zhenghong to protect Gu Ning's real identity. Leng Xiaoting kept following behind Gu Ning. His outstanding appearance and air of coldness and threat were hard to ignore. Master Bai and the others were all sophisticated. They knew that Leng Xiaoting wasn't simple at the first glance, but they had no idea about his background. They also wondered whether Gu Ning and the man were a couple. However, they refused to believe it because Gu Ning was too young after all. Gu Ning behaved like a mature grown-up, so it was still possible that she fell in love earlier than others. All in all, they wouldn't ask Gu Ning for the answer. It was her personal affair, and they had no right to interfere. They also believed that Gu Ning was a person of principles. Even if she was in love, it had to be because the man was reliable. Grandpa Fu, Grandpa Yan, Grandpa Bai, Mayor Yan, Chairman Bai. It's so nice to meet you all. Gu Ning walked over greeting them. You don't need to call me Mayor Yan. You can just call me Uncle Yan, Yan Zhenglin said kindly. He didn't seem like a man of authority at all. Gu Ning had saved his life after all, and he wasn't willing to behave like an official in front of her. Uncle Yan, welcome. Gu Ning called him as he wanted. Oh, you don't need to call me Chairman Bai either. Call me Uncle Bai, please. We aren't strangers anyway, Bai Linwei added. Bai Linwei was a pleasant person too. Most importantly, he really appreciated Gu Ning's ability and wanted to make friends with her. Uncle Bai, you're welcome too,
Gu Ning sighed.
She was of course happy to know that those significant figures were willing to have a close connection with her. At that time, a black Jaguar stopped at the road outside the Jade Beauty Jewelry store. Li Zhenyu was the driver, and Qin Yifan was sitting in the passenger seat, while Li Zhenjin was in the back seat. Even though it was a broad road and the store was 6 meters away, they still recognized Gu Ning at first sight. Why is Gu Ning here? Seeing Gu Ning, Li Zhenjin felt terrified out of instinct. Gu Ning had really scared her. She even knows the Bai family, the Yan family and the Fu family, and they seem very close. Li Zhenyu was astonished too, but he was more shocked that Gu Ning knew those masters. Li Zhenjin had the same feeling. They had thought that Gu Ning was merely a poor ordinary girl who couldn't make any acquaintance of those super rich and influential families, but they were so close now. Those masters would probably ignore Li Zhenyu directly even if he went to greet them on his own initiative. Qin Yifan was also amazed by the scene, but his attention soon moved to the man beside Gu Ning. Who is this man? Although he wasn't sure that they were a couple, Leng Xiaoting's appearance threatened Qin Yifan. He had to admit that the man was much more handsome than him. He didn't think that Gu Ning was a superficial girl who would judge a man from his appearance. Thus he believed that if Gu Ning liked this man, the man must be outstanding. Li Zhenjin loved Qin Yifan, but she also liked to appreciate other beautiful men, especially those charming male idols and stars, but Qin Yifan was the man in her heart, while others were only in her eyes. Therefore, when Leng Xiaoting appeared in her sight, Li Zhenjin was attracted by him instantly. The man was even more charming than her idol. At the same time, she was jealous of Gu Ning. No matter what the relationship between them was, even if they were only common friends, Li Zhenjin still believed that Gu Ning didn't deserve such a handsome man. However, to make Qin Yifan give up on Gu Ning, Li Zhenjin complimented against her will. The man must be Miss Gu's boyfriend. He is so handsome. Qin Yifan felt hurt, but he didn't say anything. He also had no idea that Li Zhenjin had said that on purpose, so he didn't blame her for it. Qin Yifan thought that Gu Ning must have a connection with Jade Beauty Jewelry, but Li Zhenyu and Li Zhenjin didn't think, so they only thought that Gu Ning was here to attend the opening ceremony, even though they knew that Gu Ning and Zhou Zhenghong were friends. Because of Gu Ning's presence, the three stayed in the car waiting. "Girl Gu, may I ask, who is this young man?" Master Bai glanced at Leng Xiaoting. He didn't want to investigate his background, but thought that it would be impolite if he ignored the young man. "Oh right. This is my friend Leng Xiaoting," Gu Ning immediately introduced. Leng Xiaoting only nodded to them because of his character, but he didn't show any disrespect. Master Bai and the others also smiled to him. They could tell that Leng Xiaoting wasn't a talkative man, so they didn't mind. "Let's go and see the King's Green now. You all have seen it, but I haven't yet," Bai Linwei proposed. Although he had less interest in Jade, the King's Green was worth looking at and taking a picture. "I agree. If we don't go and have a look now, it could be crowded later," Yan Zhenglin said. "We also want to see it again." "Let's go now," Master Fu said, walking into the store without delay. Master Bai and Master Yan followed. They didn't want to bother Gu Ning, especially when there was a man beside her. The Bai family ranked third, and the Fu family ranked seventh on the list of super rich and powerful families. Other than the group of those masters, the AI family that ranked second and the O family which ranked fifth arrived later too. Although their family's leaders didn't come, the visitors were important enough to represent their families. The AI family sent AI Weichen, who is Master AI's youngest grandson, to attend the ceremony. He was a 27-year-old tall, handsome man with an air of elegance. His appearance aroused excitement in the ladies. The O family sent O Nianin, who was the family leader's eldest daughter, to attend the ceremony. She was a 30-year-old ambitious woman, and the heir of the O family. The AI family and the O family had maintained a close connection with each other for generations. AI Weichen's and O Nianin's sight fell on Leng Xiaoting for a second, then moved away, but Gu Ning noticed the shock in their eyes. Yes, they were indeed shocked and amazed. "I arranged for them to come here," Leng Xiaoting said to Gu Ning in a gentle voice. Gu Ning had the same idea when AI Weichen and O Nianin glanced at Leng Xiaoting. She was surprised that Leng Xiaoting knew them because they were from super powerful families. Gu Ning was now even more certain that Leng Xiaoting wasn't simple. She was curious now about Leng Xiaoting's real identity. It seemed that the man was more influential than she imagined. However, she wouldn't ask him. Instead, she would wait until he was willing to tell her the truth. Meanwhile, Gu Ning didn't understand why AI Weichen and O Nianin looked so shocked when they came inside. Leng Xiaoting had arranged for them to attend this ceremony. They should know that Leng Xiaoting would be here too, so why did they still seem astonished? An idea dawned on Gu Ning all of a sudden. Was it because of her? Gu Ning suddenly realized that Su Jinshan had told her that Leng Xiaoting had never had a girlfriend or any woman at his side. Gu Ning assumed that they had to have been amazed to see Leng Xiaoting with her. She was right. Both Ai Weichen and O Nianin were shocked that Lung Xiaoting was with a girl, and they seemed close. Nevertheless, they didn't greet Lung Xiaoting in order to not expose their relationship. After they had sent the gifts, O Nianin immediately gossiped with Ai Weichen aside. Weichen bosses with a woman, oh no, a girl. Doesn't he dislike being too close with a female? And could they be a couple? O Nianin was excited as well as shocked. It was a big news after all. I don't know whether they're a couple or not, but I'm sure that they must be close. Ai Weichen said seriously. Of course they are. O Nianin rolled her eyes. After that, many influential people in City G gradually arrived, including many jade experts and businessmen. Zhao Yefeng came as well. Many of them didn't know Zhou Zhenghong, so they didn't send expensive gifts, but only baskets of flowers and plants. It would be impolite if they came with empty hands. Miss Gu, what a coincidence. Zhao Yefeng was surprised to see Gu Ning. Although he didn't keep in touch with Gu Ning, he had an impressive impression of her. He admired her to some extent. Thus he was more than thrilled to meet her in this opening ceremony. Mr. Zhao, nice to meet you. Gu Ning was also surprised to see Zhao Yefeng. Then she realized that she had forgotten to invite him, and felt slightly sorry. They were peers now. However, Gu Ning's business focused on jade, so they weren't competitors yet. Zhao Yefeng was involved in all kinds of jewelry, and jade was only a part of it. In addition, the major market of Zhao Yefeng's business wasn't in City G. He only had a branch here. Therefore, they weren't enemies. Gu Ning actually didn't want to hide the fact that she was the real boss of jade beauty jewelry from Zhao Yefeng. But there were too many people around, so it wasn't convenient for her to tell Zhao Yefeng her real identity. Miss Gu, do you know the boss of jade beauty jewelry? Zhao Yefeng asked. Yes, Gu Ning answered. I don't know the boss, but I wanted to have a look at the King's Green. Thus I came here without an invitation, Zhao Yefeng said. He seemed a little embarrassed. May I introduce you to the boss?
Gu Ning sighed.
Really? That would be so great. Thank you so much, Miss Gu. Zhao Yefeng was excited. Although jade beauty jewelry now was barely comparable to his Furong jewelry, it wasn't a bad idea to maintain a good relationship with its boss. Gu Ning guided Zhao Yefeng to Zhou Zhenghong, who was welcoming the guests. At the same time, Qin Yifan and the other two were surprised that Gu Ning knew Zhao Yefeng too. The Qin family and the Li family were both involved in the jewelry industry, and they were familiar with the important figures in this field. Zhou Zhenghong only greeted his guests and the visitors for a short while, then they would go inside to see the jade. Thus it didn't cause any bother when Gu Ning and Zhao Yefeng walked over. Uncle Zhou, this is the chairman of Furong Jewelry, Zhao Yefeng. Gu Ning introduced. Zhou Zhenghong actually recognized Zhao Yefeng before Gu Ning introduced him. Zhou Zhenghong worked in the jewelry industry too. But since Gu Ning introduced Zhao Yefeng to him, they must know each other, so Zhou Zhenghong greeted him with great enthusiasm. It's so nice to meet you, Chairman Zhao. Nice to meet you too, Mr. Zhou. Please don't mind my coming without invitation, Zhao Yefeng said. Of course not. You're absolutely welcomed. Would you mind dining together after the ceremony? Zhou Zhenghong invited. I'd love to, Zhao Yefeng answered. They chatted for a while longer before Zhao Yefeng went inside to see the King's Green. Everyone in the Jade Beauty Jewelry store was more than shocked that so many influential figures came today. Zhou Zhenghong was clear that it was all because of Gu Ning. Her network was amazing. However, what happened later was more shocking. Shang Juntong, who was the general manager of Qinghua Group, arrived too. The Qinghua Group was the Qing Gang's property. Although the Qinghua Group was the Qing Gang's property, it didn't stand for the Qing Gang, because it had its own network, and wouldn't bother the Qing Gang. Therefore, nobody believed that Zhou Zhenghong had a relationship with the Qing Gang. However, it wasn't easy to have a connection with the Qinghua Group. The industries of the Qinghua Group didn't concentrate in City G. Thus, even though it had over 100 billion yuan in assets, It only ranked fourth with 30 billion yuan in assets on the list of the richest in City G. The list of the richest in City G naturally only ranked according to the assets or wealth in City G. However, nobody could figure out how Zhou Zhenghong was able to invite almost half of the important figures in City G to attend his opening ceremony. Those figures came not only for the sake of Zhou Zhenghong, but also for the good of their own business. The Tsinghua Group sent a 20 centimeters tall and 15 centimeters wide natural red coral to the Jade Beauty jewelry. It was huge and rare. Natural red corals were made up of polyps. It grew very slowly and didn't regenerate. Red corals only existed in several straits: Taiwan Strait, Strait of Japan, Baltic Strait, and the Mediterranean Sea. Due to the limitation of sea areas, the red coral was super precious. Red coral was also an organic gemstone with a pleasant color and a lustrous texture. It grew in the deep sea at a depth of 1,000 to 2,000 meters. It was listed as one of the 3 organic gems, together with pearls and amber, and one of the 7 treasures in the Eastern Buddhist scriptures. It had been regarded as a symbol of good wishes since ancient times. This natural red coral was worth over 10 million yuan, which shocked everyone, including Gu Ning. She had to admit that Siti Yi was really generous. Its price wasn't a big deal. The point was that the natural red coral was too rare to buy in the market. Gu Ning liked it very much at the first sight, and decided to take it home as part of her collection. Leng Xiaoting, on the other hand, was upset to see Gu Ning being so happy about Siti Ye's gift. He immediately disliked the natural red coral. After that, Kong Yuan, the chief of staff of the military division in City G, arrived. His arrival caused another round of sensation. What? An important figure in the military division came too. There was no need to ask Leng Xiaoting. Gu Ning immediately understood that he must have arranged it too, but she was astonished by Kong Yuan's position. He was the chief of staff, which was a colonel in the army. If Leng Xiaoting was able to send him here, then Leng Xiaoting must either be his relative or in an even higher position than him. Gu Ning preferred to believe the second assumption. If he was in a higher position than Kong Yuan, he must be at least a major general. Thinking of that, Gu Ning abruptly looked to Leng Xiaoting in astonishment. Leng Xiaoting understood what was on Gu Ning's mind, and he didn't want to hide. Major General. Major General. He was a Major General. A 25-year-old Major General. It was incredible. Normally, a Major General would be over 40 years old. Gu Ning couldn't help taking a long breath in. She thought to herself, Leng Xiaoting, how old were you when you joined the army? And how many great achievements have you made? Gu Ning suddenly felt like crying. It was very difficult to achieve the position of Major General. He must have risked his life countless times and paid a lot for it. Thinking of the possible danger that Leng Xiaoting could encounter while he was on a task, Gu Ning's heart ached. She wanted to check the injuries around his body. There had to be injuries on his body. The only question was whether there were many or few injuries. Leng Xiaoting wasn't good at romance, but he was highly intelligent, so he sensed that Gu Ning was worried from her emotions at once. He knew that she was concerned about him. He was happy to know that, but also felt bad. And he could only comfort her. I'm fine. Gu Ning didn't say a word, trying to calm herself down. It wasn't the right time to cry. Qin Yifan also noticed that Gu Ning was worried about the man. He felt hurt deeply. It seemed that they were really a couple. Kong Yuan sent a gift of calligraphy written by the famous artist, Zhuge Li. By now, the brand of Jade Beauty jewelry had become completely well known. No one had ever seen such a group of influential guests from all kinds of important fields. The Jade Beauty jewelry store wasn't very big now, but it was already famous. What shocked the crowd as well was the quality and level of the jade used by Jade Beauty jewelry. The jade was all above medium level, some of them were even top level. When it was about 10 a.m., Zhou Zhenghong started to address his speech. respected leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my friends, good morning to you all. Today, we are here to hold the opening ceremony of the Jade Beauty Jewelry flagship store. As the representative of Jade Beauty Jewelry Company, Limited, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you. Jade is the essence of all things, enjoying the reputation of the crown of valuable stones. It has the good meanings of luck, wit, nobility, and fortune. Jade Beauty Jewelry will create high-end jade jewelry. Let's wish Jade Beauty Jewelry a thriving future. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. After the speech, there was a round of applause. Then it was time for the ribbon cutting. Yin Zhenglin, Kong Yuan and Master Bai cut the ribbon together. After the ribbon cutting, guests could make a reservation for the King's Green. Gu Ning thought that there would be few people who were willing to pay a high price for jade, but unexpectedly, over a dozen people made a reservation. However, the King's Green wasn't big enough to fulfill their needs, so they could only apply an alternative plan. Luckily, Gu Ning had prepared a plan B for it. The alternative was to bid secretly. Customers could write down the bid price and types of jewelry he or she wanted on a piece of paper, then hand the paper to the worker. The worker would collect all the pieces of paper and the most generous buyer would win the King's Green. Before long, the results were revealed. Undoubtedly, both Master Fu and Master Bai won a wide jade ring at a much higher price than others. Gu Ning had already made over 100 million yuan on the first day before the store even opened. Because it was only the reservation for the jewelry, they each paid a deposit of 20%. Moreover, there would be a gap between the predetermined number of grams and the final number of grams. If the jewelry exceeded the predetermined number of grams the customer had reserved, there was no need to pay more for it, and the customer could acquire more than the predetermined number of grams at the original price. And if the jewelry didn't meet the predetermined number of grams the customer had reserved, its price would be lowered accordingly. It was universally acknowledged and accepted that the weight of the jewelry couldn't be 100% accurate. Gu Ning, of course, would not take advantage of her customers, and the jewelry would only be heavier, not lighter. It wasn't a big deal to let the customers buy the jewelry at a lower price. It hadn't cost her much money to get the jade after all. Zhou Zhenghong guided the guests to have a meal in the Huangding Hotel later. Qin Yifan and the other two didn't show up at all from the beginning to the end. All the staff remained in the store and didn't follow Zhou Zhenghong to the hotel. They would eat in the afternoon. The Jade Beauty Jewelry store wasn't far away from the Huangding Hotel. It only took several minutes to walk there, so most walked while some drove. During that break, Leng Xiaoting said to Gu Ning, "Please follow me. I have something to give you." "What is it?" Gu Ning was surprised and curious. She followed Leng Xiaoting to his car in the parking lot. Leng Xiaoting took out a wooden box from his car. It was as big as 2 palms. Gu Ning opened the wooden box and felt a strong power hit her face. She trembled a little, but when she saw what was inside, she couldn't believe her eyes. There were 2 huge diamonds in it. One was blue and the other was red. Both were as big as a quail's egg. There was also a blood-red jade bracelet and a purple jade the size of an egg. It was a top-level jade called Purple Eye. Gu Ning didn't know the price of the diamonds, but she knew that of the Purple Eye jade and the blood-red jade bracelet. Purple Eye jade was at the same level as Fulishu jade. This Purple Eye jade was as big as an egg, and it must be worth at least a couple dozen million yuan. And the blood-red jade bracelet was even more precious. Gu Ning had read the news on the internet that a blood-red jade bracelet which weighed 46 grams had been sold at the price of 480 million yuan at auction. But this blood-red jade bracelet in the box was even several grams heavier. Price at auction was normally much higher than at market price. And the exact price of jewelry actually depended on the buyer. Gold, for instance, it was worth 300 yuan a gram sometimes, and was worth 200 yuan a gram at other times. Its price changed. "It's more precious than his," Leng Xiaoting said airily. Gu Ning was struck dumb for a second and didn't know what to say. Leng Xiaoting explained further. The blood-red jade bracelet is more precious than the red coral. Hearing that, Gu Ning immediately understood what Leng Xiaoting meant. She snorted with laughter all of a sudden. Leng Xiaoting was jealous just because Sita Yi had sent her a valuable natural red coral. Gu Ning teased. Are you jealous? Leng Xiaoting flushed, feeling uneasy, but he didn't deny it. Gu Ning didn't know what to do. Leng Xiaoting was being so sensitive. He had been jealous of Sita Yi twice today. Actually, it wasn't completely Leng Xiaoting's fault. Because Gu Ning hadn't agreed to be his girlfriend yet, he didn't feel secure. He was afraid that Gu Ning would reject him once he didn't perform well. I like it very much. Saying that, Gu Ning put the blood-red jade bracelet on her wrist. Gu Ning not only liked it, but was also deeply moved. It was so beautiful and precious. Most importantly, it was from Leng Xiaoting. Thus, except for the blood-red jade bracelet, Gu Ning absorbed all the power from the rest in the box. Her jade eyes were already full of power yesterday, and the telepathic eye space expanded a square meters afterwards. Where did you get these? Gu Ning asked with curiosity. I picked some up in the middle of fulfilling tasks, and others sent me some. I have many more of them in the capital, Leng Xiaoting said. Leng Xiaoting had no interest in jewelry. It was nothing different than a stone in Leng Xiaoting's eyes. If it hadn't been priceless, Leng Xiaoting wouldn't have kept it. Now, since he found out that Gu Ning liked jewelry, he would keep it well for her. Gu Ning didn't know that Leng Xiaoting had gone back to the capital in order to bring the jewelry to her until now. She felt like crying once more. This man didn't say sweet nothings, but everything he had done was more special and meaningful than oral promises. Actions spoke louder than words after all. Gu Ning curbed her impulse to cry, saying, Could you please keep it for me for a while? It isn't convenient for me to take it right now. It indeed wasn't convenient for her to hold such a big box. And with Leng Xiaoting's presence, she wasn't able to put it into the telepathic eye space. Leng Xiaoting took the wooden box and laid it back in its original place. After that, the two went straight to the Huangdang Hotel. Because Master Bai and the other important figures were there too, Gu Ning couldn't be absent. What had happened at the opening ceremony of Jade Beauty Jewelry went abroad before it aired on the news at 6:30. The news went viral on the internet within a short time. Everyone was shocked by the opening ceremony of Jade Beauty Jewelry, especially peers who worked in the jewelry industry. Luckily, Jade Beauty Jewelry only made jade jewelry, and wasn't involved in other kinds of jewelry yet. Meanwhile, Xiaoping finally woke up, but his first reaction was to ask the condition of Jade Beauty Jewelry, instead of himself or his car. Mrs. Xiao had kept her eyes on the news of Jade Beauty Jewelry, and was quite jealous of it. Honey, Jade Beauty Jewelry is big news today. Over a half of the celebrities in City G have attended its opening ceremony, including the AI family, the Bai family, the Qinghua group, the O family, the Fu family, and even the mayor. The chief of staff also. Before Mrs. Xiao could finish, Xiaoping was hit heavily by the news. He spat a mouthful of blood before he fainted again. Honey! Honey! Doctor, please! Mrs. Xiao panicked, running to the doctor at once. At the same time, Wei Jiming, who was the general manager of the entertainment industry of the Qin gang, made up his mind that his son had to be revenged, even though it was his son's fault. He would protect his son no matter whose fault it was. However, he hesitated after he found out that Leng Xiaoting's car belonged to the AI family. The Qin gang wasn't afraid of the AI family, but Wei Jiming was afraid of it. It was Wei Feihong's fault after all. If he secretly used the Qin gang's force to get revenge on the AI family, his boss would punish him if it was exposed. Thus, although Wei Jiming was mad, he had to give it up. In case Wei Feihong would cause any more trouble, he reminded his son to be more careful. Facing his father, Wei Feihong had to listen to the persuasion. After the meal, Gu-ning went back to the store with Zhou Zhenghong. It was already crowded in the Jade Beauty jewelry store. The King's Green was fully reserved, but it was still shown in the store for the whole day, so many came here to see it. And there were also many jade buyers. City G was developing well nowadays and there were many rich people in this city. Gu-ning noticed a familiar face the minute she walked inside. It was the woman who had dined with Li Zhenjin the last time when Gu-ning had encountered Li Zhenjin in a restaurant. Although they had only met once, Gu-ning remembered it clearly with the help of her outstanding memory. Seeing Su Jing, Gu-ning unconsciously checked whether Li Zhenjin was here too. She was ready to revenge herself on Li Zhenjin now, but Li Zhenjin wasn't in the store. Su Jing was only shopping with a man who was around 30 years old. Jingjing, Li Zhenjin doesn't know that you're here to buy jewelry, right? The man asked. I didn't tell her. If she finds out that I came here to buy jewelry instead of jewelry stores owned by her family, she'll be mad at me. But the jewelry in the stores of her family is so ordinary, and I don't like its design either. Other high-end brands are too expensive. This store is newly opened, and customers can have a 10% discount today. I absolutely need to have a look here, Su Jing said, and she complained a little about Li Zhenjin. The man stayed quiet and Su Jing added, Oh, Zhenjin won't dine with us this afternoon. She'll meet us at Yongla Club around 9 a.m. in the morning. Gu-ning heard their talk clearly. After hearing Li Zhenjin's schedule, Gu-ning had a good idea. It was a perfect timing and she wouldn't miss it. Fine, but I'm afraid that someone will be disappointed, the man joked. In fact, I have sympathy for Senator. He was a playboy, but now has changed a lot for Zhenjin. Unfortunately, Zhenjin likes another man, Su Jing said. Nevertheless, I have sympathy for Li Zhenjin. She fell in love with a man who dislikes her. It has been so many years. I don't think she can be together with him, the man said. Indeed. They aren't like us who love each other deeply, Su Jing said, holding the man's hand in happiness. However, Gu-ning sensed that the man didn't feel as happy as Su Jing. The man probably wasn't as deeply in love with Su Jing as she thought. Gu-ning didn't stay in the store for very long, and left with Leng shouting. Where to now? Leng shouting asked after they were in the car. Gu-ning had the same question in mind. Where should we go next? At that time Leng shouting's phone rang. Wherever he was and whatever he was doing, as long as he wasn't restricted, he would answer the call, especially when the caller was his teammate. His teammates always called him for something important. The caller was Su Jinshin this time. Leng shouting didn't avoid Gu-ning. What's up? Where are you, boss? Su Jinshin asked, or complained to be specific. Do you have anything important to say? Hearing Su Jinshin's voice, Leng shouting immediately understood that he had nothing serious to talk to him about. Nothing serious, actually. I just want to know where you are now. I arrived at City F yesterday and I wanted to come to you, but your phone was turned off, Su Jinshin said. He felt that he had been abandoned. Do you have too much time to kill? Leng shouting asked. Su Jinshin instantly sensed danger ahead. He understood that if he gave his boss an affirmative answer now, he would be tortured, so he denied at once. No. I'm boss. Bye. Su Jinshin hung up right away. Guam ning lau ga outlawed? She asked with curiosity. Why is he so afraid of you? Su Jinshin behaved like a child in front of Leng shouting. I've punished him too many times, Leng shouting replied. Oh, was Su Jinshin right in saying that you're mean and always punish you fellows? Gu-ning asked, although she didn't believe it herself. However, Leng shouting got nervous, explaining without delay. Of course not. We've trained strictly before, and I punished them when they were lazy, so they're all scared of me. Well, I think you're right, Gu-ning agreed. She was absolutely clear about how cruel the training could be. Once you got lazy or didn't meet the standards, you would be punished severely. If you weren't strong enough, you were out. Gu-ning still had no idea where they should go next. Oh, let's go to the Street of Antiques.
Kuningsaid.
The news of jade beauty jewelry went across many cities around City G. People were all shocked by its grand opening ceremony. Outsiders might forget it soon after they had read the news, but insiders, especially jewelry businessmen and jade lovers, couldn't care about it more. Xiaoping woke up after a while, but he still couldn't accept the truth that Zhou Zhenghong was the boss of jade beauty jewelry, who had caused a sensation around the city. He wanted to forget it all, but all the TV news was reminding him of it. Oh, what about the door in my car? Did you find out who did it? Xiaoping asked in anger. He failed to figure out whom he had annoyed, and who had damaged the door of his home and his car.
No idea.
The man in the monitoring room told me that the tape was broken during a certain period of time. I think it's a scheme. Someone did it on purpose, and the man in the monitoring room must have been bribed. I've already called the police. Mrs. Xiao was mad too. She believed that it couldn't be an accident. Could it be Zhou Zhenghong? You just got hoodlums to damage his store yesterday. Then the door of our home and your car are ruined today. If it wasn't him, I can't think of anyone else, Mrs. Xiao said. Xiaoping then realized that what his wife said was indeed possible. The Jade Beauty jewelry store opened today as planned, which meant that his plan had failed last night. He also knew that those hoodlums would betray him if they felt that it was necessary. To make sure of it, Xiaoping immediately took out his phone, calling the leading hoodlum. However, the leading hoodlum still wouldn't answer his call, so Xiaoping called Leader Hu afterwards. Leader Hu answered, "Hi, what's up, Mr. Xiao?" "Hi, Leader Hu, those hoodlums helped me deal with Zhou Zhenghong's store last night, but they won't answer my call now. I don't know why. I think that they probably failed. Could you please help me find them?" Although Xiaoping was raging now, he didn't dare to vent his anger at Leader Hu. Really? Did they get in trouble? Leader Hu was surprised that Jade Beauty jewelry was able to handle those hoodlums. Leader Hu didn't deny Xiaoping's request. "Let me try to find them, and then I'll let you know the minute that I do." "Very well, thank you so much," Xiaoping said, then he hung up. "Honey, what if Zhou Zhenghong really damaged our door and car?" Mrs. Xiao asked. "If it is true, we'll do the same thing to him. He has made me lose hundreds of thousands of yuan this time." Xiaoping clenched his teeth, as if he was the victim. If he hadn't turned to those hoodlums for help, Zhou Zhenghong wouldn't have gotten revenge on him. In addition, Zhou Zhenghong hadn't actually done it. Xiaoping not only annoyed Zhou Zhenghong, but aggravated Gu Ning, who was the real boss of Jade Beauty jewelry. Of course, Xiaoping wasn't dumb enough to cause Zhou Zhenghong trouble in public. He would scheme against Zhou Zhenghong behind his back. In the end, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting didn't go to the Street of Antiques because of an incident on the road halfway there. They were in an old district of City G, and there were many people as well as policemen gathered around the entrance of a street, fiercely arguing. Leng Xiaoting, who was a military officer, couldn't ignore it, so he stopped the car on the side, got out of it and walked over. Two groups of people stood against each other in the middle of a crowd. A group of citizens all had sticks and brooms in their hands, while the other group, who were policemen, all had their hands on their guns. Ding Peiwei, it's illegal to use violence against the police. As a senior teacher, you should know that. How dare you lead others to resist us on the street? You'll be taken into the police station. A man who was around 30 years old loudly said to a man in his middle 40s, "It's you who aren't being honest. You can't blame us. We agree that the real estate businessmen need to acquire land to develop a new city, but you should at least give us a reasonable price." Ding Peiwei argued angrily. Hearing that, Gu Ning immediately understood what was going on here. The real estate businessman wanted to acquire the land, but was rejected because of the low compensation. Exactly. Don't think that we know nothing about it. The acquisition of land in Dongqing last year is a great example. The location of the land is similar to Zhengyang Street, and the foundation was worth 20,000 yuan, while the building area was 10,000 yuan per square meter. However, what did you do this time? The foundation is only worth 15,000 yuan, and the building area is only 7,000 yuan per square meter. Aren't you hurting our interests? Another person said with indignation. How can you be so evil? Are you not afraid of being punished by God? All the citizens criticized. Hearing that, Gu Ning was also mad. It was truly unfair. She had inspected the surrounding area just then. It was a great location, and it would be reasonable if the foundation was worth 20,000 yuan, and the building area was 10,000 yuan per square meter. Although it was an old district which wasn't as prosperous as the newer ones, there were schools around, including primary, middle, and high schools. Therefore, many would come here to buy houses if there were more living areas. It would be a very profitable deal. Thinking of that, an idea dawned on Gu Ning. She decided to acquire this land. Since this Hongyun real estate gave them a low price, then she would set a higher and more reasonable price. The man who was standing against Ding Peiwei was called Zhang Guangde. He was the leader of this area, and he didn't know how to argue with those citizens, because he really had planned to take the extra money into his own pocket. Zhang Guangde, let me tell you that if Hongyun real estate can't give us a reasonable price, we won't comprise no matter what happens, Ding Peiwei said with determination.
Fine.
Let's see what you can do. Zhang Guangde didn't know how to solve the problem now, so he could only threaten them before walking away with the policeman. Luckily, no one was injured in this mess. After Zhang Guangde and the policeman were gone, Gu Ning walked to Ding Peiwei. Although Leng Xiaoting didn't know what Gu Ning was going to do, he listened to her and waited by the car. Hi, Mr. Ding, may I talk to you in private? Gu Ning asked politely. Since Ding Peiwei was able to lead them to resist the acquisition, he must be an influential figure among the citizens. Ding Peiwei thought that Gu Ning was a student in his school. He failed to recognize her, but since she had something to talk to him about, he didn't reject. Afterwards, Ding Peiwei walked aside with Gu Ning. What do you want to talk to me about? Ding Peiwei asked. He was still mad, but tried his best to remain gentle in front of Gu Ning. Gu Ning didn't hide her intention and asked directly, I noticed that you were arguing over the acquisition of this land. Is it because you don't want to leave here, or are you not satisfied with the compensation? Hearing that, Ding Peiwei sighed resignedly and explained, I've lived here for dozens of years, so of course I don't want to move away, but we also know that this city needs to develop, and the demolition will happen sooner or later. Even though we're unwilling to do so, we can't fight against the government. But the compensation that Hongyun Real Estate offers is too low. What if I can provide you with a reasonable compensation in which the foundation is worth 20,000 yuan, and the building area is 10,000 yuan per square meter? Are you willing to sell the land to me? What? Ding Peiwei was shocked. He couldn't believe his ears. If a 30-year-old mature woman had said that to him, he probably wouldn't have been shocked, but Gu Ning was merely a teenage girl.